This is a Cinderella story about a 17-year-old pharmacist who became well-known and helped a lot of people with her abilities and rationale. The story starts with Maomao helping out her grandfather. She was asked to deliver some medicine, but was warned about some kidnappings happening around town. As she makes her way to the bustling city, she's seen by a few individuals, and it seems that they have plans to kidnap her. At the Verdigris house, a Courtesan house where her grandmother and sisters are working, her grandmother tells a few clients to pay if they want to spend some time with the girls. Maomao made her way to the medicine hall and was spotted by her sister, Palin. She's concerned about Maomao's wounds, but she tells her that the wounds just came from medical experiments. Just then, her grandmother chimed in and asked if she'd be ready to join her sisters as courtesans, to which she refused and immediately rushed out of the brothel. Maomao found herself in a patch of herbs and flowers when the three men from earlier caught her and kidnapped her so she could be sent to the palace. She seemed nonchalant about what happened and thought of how her grandfather would be worried. Meanwhile, in the palace, a baby is born into the family. At this time, Maomao is already in a palace as a servant and wonders how her grandfather is doing. She didn't have a hint of worry on her face, but she wanted to go home. It seems she has no choice but to work her way to freedom. The rear palace is filled with different concubines, slaves, and eunuchs, men who are castrated and employed as slaves in the palace. She's relieved, though, that at least she gets paid. She's been observing a lot of people around her and how looks matter, especially for concubines. A lot of them were illiterate, but they knew basic etiquette. She compared herself to other courtesans in terms of her physical looks, so she's already disregarding the thought of becoming a concubine. Maomao is doing laundry with her Xiaolan, a servant whom she befriended. She mentioned a handsome eunuch and how much she wanted to see him, but Maomao wasn't that interested in eyeing a guy. Back at the palace, a man noticed Lady Lihua, the high consort, was getting skinnier after the birth of the prince, and Lady Gyokuyu, another consort, wanted a physician to attend to her and her baby, Xiaoling. They were denied this request because attending to the prince is a high priority. Back at the rear palace, Xiaolan told the story about how all the deaths of the heirs are born in the rear palace, and she thinks it's a form of a curse because the previous children of the emperor died, but Maomao refused to believe in such superstitious beliefs. After finding out about Lady Lihua and her son's symptoms, Maomao thought that they might be really ill rather than cursed. Maomao's curiosity got the best of her, so she decided to investigate further. Just then, a commotion is taking place in the palace courtyard. Lady Lihua slapped Lady Gyokuyu and blamed her for the curse that happened to her and her son. She believes that Lady Gyokuyu cursed her because she bore a daughter. Still, Lady Gyokuyu protested and told her that her newborn daughter, Xiaoling, was also sick. The two caused such a scene that the crowd started murmuring, and the physician couldn't do anything about their quarrel. Maomao thought that the physician looked ridiculous because he couldn't handle the situation well. Jinshi, the eunuch Xiaolan told Maomao about, is trying to de-escalate the situation, but stops after noticing Maomao's presence. But she is long gone. Later that night, Lady Lihua wept as her son died. Word quickly reached the rear palace, and Maomao felt bad that this had happened. Lady Gyokyu and Jinshi were talking about a mysterious message tied to a rhododendron and how the physician was not knowledgeable about how to treat the prince. Jinshi remembered Maomao and what she said when she was trying to solve the issue. Back at the rear palace, Maomao was summoned immediately to face the eunuch, Jinshi. Maomao is nervous. Usually, a servant being summoned by high officials isn't good news. The other maidens felt giddy after seeing Jinshi, but Maomao wondered if he was really a man. Due to his good looks, she deduced that he was probably the eunuch Xiaolan was talking about. Jinshi wrote on the piece of paper, "You with the freckles, stay here," and Maomao was taken by surprise. Gathering a crowd like that just to get Maomao is a smart move, and she realizes that she's the only servant who can read and write. Jinshi asked a few questions, but Maomao pretended to be ignorant. The two made their way to Lady Gyokuyu's place and were thanked by the lady for saving the baby's life. Maomao tried to deny the help she had given, but Jinshi bought out the piece of cloth Maomao had written the message. Maomao had no choice but to explain her side. She was able to figure out why Lady Lihua was poisoned, as the white powder most courtesans used in the brothel is poisonous, and a lot of women lost their lives by using it. Maomao remembered her grandfather tending to a dying woman who got poisoned due to this white powder. She admitted that she used to be an apothecary, a person with knowledge of making medicines. Lady Gyokuyu felt guilty for her ignorance, as she caused her daughter and even one of her servants to be ill because of this powder. Jinshi also felt guilty for not noticing it either. Lady Gyokuyu tried helping out Lady Lihua and telling her about the message, but it just fell on deaf ears, and she believed that this caused a scene. Maomao's actions were rewarded, as Lady Gyokuyu ordered her to be her lady-in-waiting, basically a promotion from becoming a rear palace servant to a personal helper at a higher or noble court. Despite Maomao's intention to keep a low profile, her curiosity, knowledge, and ambition to help those in need got the best of her. That was quite a turn of events for Maomao. If you've enjoyed the video so far, leave a like and a comment down below and tell us what you think of the series. Meanwhile, at a soldier's camp, some warriors were having their meal when a few fell ill. The soldiers believed that they were poisoned by the villagers who made their meal. News of the situation reached Jinshi through Gao Shun, his right-hand man and attendant. They also discussed Maomao's promotion as lady-in-waiting and thought of how Lady Lihua had many personal servants compared to Lady Gyokuyu. But Jinshi mentioned that Lady Gyokuyu is wise and cautious. That's why she only keeps a few trusted servants. Jinshi mentioned that Maomao's knowledge and expertise are too valuable to pass up. Back at the rear palace, Jinshi fetched Maomao and made a lot of concubines extremely jealous. Jinshi brushed her hair, which sent shivers up her spine. Jinshi is quite the flirt and thought he was able to entice her even more, but Maomao just felt disgusted. Maomao was sent to the Jade Pavilion, where Lady Gyokuyu lives. She's given the grand tour and seemed impressed by how grand everything is. She is then sent to the other personal servants of Lady Gyokuyu, Yinghua, Guiwan, and Ailan. Since there are a total of 4 servants, including Maomao, a lot of the work around the Jade Pavilion is usually done by them. The 3 noticed the bandages underneath Maomao's sleeve and asked her to take a rest for now as she was assigned a special task. Confused, she went ahead with the tour and was led to her room. The 3 courtesans were worried about her and the bandages covering her arm. They fondly thought of her and wondered if she had had a rough childhood. Little do they know that those are just Maomao's medicinal experiments gone wrong. Maomao lay on her new bed and wondered why those girls looked so concerned about her, even though she thought newcomers were usually bullied. Jinshi soon called her for a poison tasting, and Maomao had to figure out if the food had poison. Maomao lit up, as this was something that was up to her speed. Jinshi explained that the concubines' meals have been passed through a few hands before reaching the person who will eat them so that the food may be poisoned in the process by someone. A previous concubine was poisoned when she checked a meal for Lady Gyokuyu. Maomao began to examine each dish, from the servingware to the food itself. She recalled how she did a few experiments, which creeped his grandpa out, and she gradually gained immunity against most poisons. After that, she suggested to Hongnyang, the head lady-in-waiting, to change the servingwares to silver instead of ceramic ones, but Jinshi had already purposefully set up the test to see how much she knew, which annoyed Maomao quite a bit. Maomao told her how she became a servant. Hongnyang then got an idea to trick Maomao into not paying her kidnappers any money. Hongnyang made Maomao drop an expensive vase on purpose so that she'd have to pay it off, but the money, of course, would be deducted from her salary. She's also given a hazard payment for the poison tasting, which goes directly into her pocket without any deduction. The next couple of days were difficult for Maomao because the other servants kept on telling her to take a rest, and she was only called for poison tastings. She was bored out of her mind. Just then, she was called to Lady Gyokuyu's presence. Jinshi is also in the room, but wonders why his charm isn't working on her. He gave her another test and asked her to check some steamed buns for any poison. There wasn't any poison, but the filling was laced with aphrodisiac, and after knowing this, Jinshi asked Maomao to eat the buns. Instead, Maomao shivered and refused to eat the buns. Jinshi also asked Maomao for help regarding what happened at the soldiers' camp. The people who were poisoned experienced nausea, difficulty breathing, and other symptoms. It was also reported that the village leader was taken into custody because of what happened, since it was the villagers who prepared their food. Maomao then had an idea of what happened after spotting the rhododendron in the room. She explained that parts of the plant are very toxic, especially the wood, when it's burned, as it emits a toxin that can poison anyone who inhales the smoke. After finding a resolution to the situation, Maomao wanted to leave, but Jinshi had another task for her and wanted her to make an aphrodisiac. Maomao's eyes lit up again as she got to make drugs. After regaining her composure, she assured Jinshi that with the proper setup and ingredients, she could make any drug that they requested. As Jinshi returned to his room, a courtesan tried to seduce him by inviting him over for tea, but Jinshi politely declined the offer. Gaoshun mentioned that the servants mustn't know that Jinshi is there to test the concubine's loyalty to the emperor. Jinshi mentions that concubines, beyond their beauty and allure, should also be loyal to the emperor and chaste. Jinshi, however, had a different opinion of Maomao. Her disgust seemed to have humbled the handsome eunuch, which was a breath of fresh air for him. After Gao Shun left him, he remembered what Maomao had said about someone visiting him tonight, so he locked his doors just to be sure. The next day, Maomao beamed as she started her journey to collect ingredients. She met Gao Shun and the palace physician. She can feel the physician's glare and hear his subtle remarks. After that awkward meeting, she's led to a room full of different ingredients used to make medicines. Maomao is so happy that she dances awkwardly that Jinshi begins to notice and thinks it's a cursed dance. Maomao noticed how accessible many things were, like ingredients and paper. Gao Shun has been very attentive to her needs, and Maomao is glad to have him around. But she's quite annoyed with Jinshi, as he's just standing there doing nothing. After asking for more cacao beans, Maomao concocted an aphrodisiac out of milk, butter, sugar, honey, and powdered cacao. Her fellow ladies-in-waiting were curious about what she was making. Hong Niang caught them eavesdropping and scolded them to return to work. Maomao got to work on making the aphrodisiac. She recalled an incident where she tried chocolate at the brothel and ended up dizzy. After making a batch of aphrodisiacs, she waited for them to harden and cool down. She had some leftover mixture for the aphrodisiac, made chocolate squares, and left to wait for the rest to set. As she was walking, she noticed a lot of medicinal herbs along the walkway and started picking, but she got so carried away that she almost forgot about the aphrodisiac. When she returned, Gao Shun, Hong Niang, and Jinshi were by the door of the kitchen and were quite embarrassed with what they saw. Yinghua, Guiyuan, and Ailan were all in heat because they had eaten some of the leftovers that Maomao made, and Hong Niang scolded Maomao for her carelessness. Back at the Jade Pavilion, Maomao presented the aphrodisiac to Lady Gyokuyu and Jinshi. The leftovers she made were her midnight snacks, which shocked the entire room, even Hong Niang and Gao Shu. However, Maomao explained that people with a high tolerance for alcohol and stimulants won't be affected by the side effects as much. Jinshi curiously took a piece and told them that he should be good with it since he was immune. Hong Niang and Gao Shu protested not to do that, which amused Lady Gyokuyu. Maomao prescribed the aphrodisiac to be taken only once, as the effects are more potent than the usual tonic. Lady Gyokuyu wanted Maomao to make one for the emperor, but after hearing the side effects, she had to think twice. When Lady Gyokuyu and Hong Niang left, Jinshi went and whispered his thanks behind Maomao. At first, she was caught by surprise, but she felt violated afterward when he left. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, a servant saw a pretty scary figure in the darkness of the night. The next day, Jinshi spoke to a lady-in-waiting named Fu Yu regarding a reward for something. Back in the Jade Pavilion, the three girls, Ailan, Yinghua, and Guiyuan, are going about their daily tasks, and some talk about how difficult it is to be the personal maid of Lady Gyokuyu. As Yinghua proceeds with her next task, she tells the girls they have some assistance now that Maomao is here. She then proceeded to the kitchen and tried bugging Maomao if she needed any help. She was still treating her like a baby. Yinghua shared a rumor about a ghost lurking around the rear palace. She's known as the Lady in White. Xiaolan confirmed this rumor, and she said that the ghost came in and out of the eastern castle walls. But of course, Maomao's skepticism still tried to make sense of the situation and just called it another typical ghost story. Maomao delivered medicine to the physician, and he seemed to be less wary of her than before. He offered her some snacks, and just then, Jinshi came and asked for some too, but the physician hurriedly gave them different snacks. Maomao wonders why he's just out and about and not working. She thinks he's one of the emperor's concubines, and after asking the physician to run an errand, Jinshi asks about the ghost. He insisted that it could be sleepwalking and thought if there was another cure apart from medicine. Since Maomao specializes in medicine, she might not be able to do anything about it. Still, after a few puppy dog-eyed looks from Jinshi, Maomao gave in, much to her annoyance. Later that night, Gao Shu assisted Maomao back to her quarters. He asked her not to look down on Jinshi so much, as it makes him act weird. Just then, they notice Fu Yu dancing on top of the palace walls. Maomao discussed her encounter with Lady Fu Yu, and after finding out that he's been treated as a reward for a military officer, she hasn't been the same ever since. Still, Maomao wanted to investigate further, then assumed that her illness was more mental than physical. Lady Fu Yu is different from last night, as Maomao assumed, and compared her to a cotton flower that changes color at night. Later on, Maomao presented her theory to Lady Gyokuyu and Jinshi. She told of a similar story that happened in a brothel, where a concubine was sleepwalking after finding out that she was going to be sold to a merchant. But when that offer was taken back, the concubine stopped sleepwalking. Lady Gyokuyu noticed that Maomao was acting differently than usual and she decided to check on her further. After confronting her, Maomao told the truth about the courtesan at the brothel. The truth is, she was offered half the price by another person, and after the first one called off the offer, she was still bought for half the price despite her being sick. Maomao thinks the same thing is happening to Lady Fuyu. The soldier whom Lady Fuyu is being given to is a childhood friend of hers, and when the soldier is asked what reward he wants to receive after fighting valiantly against the barbarians, he asks for Lady Fuyu. This is also the reason why Lady Fuyu intentionally stumbled on her dance so that the emperor wouldn't touch her and would keep her body pure for her childhood friend. All in all, Lady Fuyu just pretended to be sick so that she could be given away to the man she loves the most. After Maomao and Lady Fuyu figured out the whole situation, they saw Lady Fuyu from a distance meet up with her childhood friend and now the love of her life. Lady Jokuyu envies her quite a bit, and Maomao thinks of how love brings out the beauty in a woman. She wonders what medicine love makes to make a woman so beautiful. Later on, a request for Maomao was given to Lady Jokuyu. At the Crystal Pavilion, where Lady Lihua resides, Maomao was scolded by some of the other female servants about the food she prepared for Lady Lihua. Her food has been thrown to the ground. The dishes are all shattered. The servants are berating her, and it is quite an ordeal for Maomao. A little while back, Maomao continued her poison-tasting training, only this time in front of the emperor himself. Maomao has become pretty popular and was even called famous by the emperor. He asked Maomao to look after Lady Lihua as she was not feeling well, and Maomao knew that she needed to cure her, and she couldn't decline because she could be executed if she did. Maomao is also surprised that he requested this in front of Lady Jokuyo. Back in the present, Maomao is temporarily working at Lady Lihua's palace. Maomao thought the reason she was also being persecuted was because she was a servant of Lady Jokuyo. Despite this, she still continues to cook for her. Maomao and Xiaolan were eating back at the rear palace. They were talking about how Lady Lihua was still sick because of the white powder. Maomao thinks that the palace doctor is unreliable because the emperor himself asked for her personally. She went back to the kitchen and curated a diet that would help Lady Lihua feel better. Unfortunately, the female servants are still pushing her away, and when Maomao sees the meals that Lady Lihua is eating, crab, pork, fish, soup, and some buns, the tray is a feast in itself. Maomao thought that the meals that she had were difficult to digest and too heavy for a sick person's stomach, despite being nutritious. After seeing Lady Lihua's state and how she's rejecting the food being given to her, Maomao begins to understand why she's getting worse. The servants blamed her presence for ruining the atmosphere, although it didn't have anything to do with Lady Lihua's current state. Maomao gets kicked out of the Crystal Pavilion again and wonders how she'll be able to reach Lady Lihua. Meanwhile, Jinshi and Gaoshun saw what happened from a distance. Maomao tried again, and she was pushed away. She also thought of Lady Lihua being depressed after losing her son. Maomao worries that she'll be beheaded for failing the emperor's request. Maomao carried another meal for Lady Lihua. A lot of things were going through her mind. Just then, Jinshi saw her and tried helping her out, but Maomao doubted that this situation would end well. The lady servants saw Jinshi talking to Maomao and asked why he'd done that to a lowly servant. Jinshi moved closer to Maomao and whispered to her that he'd accompany her to Lady Lihua. The ladies got jealous, but Jinshi charmed them into letting them inside Lady Lihua's chambers. Maomao got scared at how the girls felt giddy and how they changed their minds after seeing Jinshi's handsome face. Jinshi and Maomao got inside Lady Lihua's chambers, and Jinshi urged her to give Lady Lihua her meal. Maomao was able to feed her, but she was still weak. Maomao noticed the white powder on her face, and she confronted the servants. She asked who was in charge of Lady Lihua's makeup, and a servant spoke and said that she did her makeup and justified that she wanted Lady Lihua to stay beautiful. Despite the decree not to use the white powder anymore, Maomao slapped her and dragged her by the hair. She went and got the white powder they used, which is kept in the drawer, and dropped everything on her. Maomao told her that she'd also be poisoned because of the white powder, the same powder that was banned and sent Lady Lihua into her sickly state. The servant realized her mistake and cried. Maomao sent her off and asked her to wash her face and rinse her mouth immediately, and she told the other servants to clean up the mess. It was quite a sight for Jinshi, and Maomao forgot that she was there. Maomao fed her liquid food and tried to have her eat as much as she could at a slower pace. She also thought that she needed ventilation, so she opened the windows and thought of how incompetent the ladies-in-waiting were. She asked the other servants to fetch a cloth and some hot water. Maomao took charge of the ladies-in-waiting, giving them clear instructions on what they needed to do to help Lady Lihua out. The servants followed out of fear. Maomao kept on feeding her liquid food until she got better, and she gradually changed her diet after Lady Lihua started eating more. The servant who put makeup on Lady Lihua was punished by confinement. The eunuch, who was supposed to recover the powder, was punished by flagellation. Back at the rear palace, Maomao was doing laundry when Gaoshun and Jinshi visited her. They gave her a gift, and she accepted graciously, even though she thought that Gaoshun would make a great husband. Jinshi used his charm again to ask Maomao if she needed help with anything. Maomao was reluctant at first, but she was able to ask Jinshi to make a steam bath for her, but it wasn't really for her. Maomao just used whatever she had at her disposal, and in this case, Jinshi's willingness to help her out. Back at the Crystal Pavilion, Maomao watched over Lady Lihua. Just then, Lady Lihua spoke, and she asked why Maomao didn't let her die. Maomao knew she wanted to live, otherwise she wouldn't have eaten the porridge. Lady Lihua looked back at the memories of her late son and realized that she wanted to live. Maomao continued taking care of Lady Lihua and used the steam bath from Jinshi, shouting to him, so that Lady Lihua could sweat off all the remaining toxins in her body. Maomao monitored her closely and even taught the ladies-in-waiting a thing or two about chores. The confined servant was released from her punishment, told Maomao that she'd take it from here and asked Maomao to take a rest. She swore that she wouldn't make the same mistake again. She continued what Maomao did and served Lady Lihua with a newfound realization and maturity. After 2 months, Lady Lihua fully recovered, and Maomao had an epiphany about her. Lady Lihua is a strong woman who isn't arrogant and has a ton of self-respect. She has a personality befitting a concubine. Maomao was spent after a long day of working and laid down, and after falling into a deep slumber, Lady Lihua sat by her side and watched over her lovingly. Maomao told Lady Lihua that she'd be leaving tomorrow. Lady Lihua asks if she's still capable of giving birth to a child, but she asks this because she thinks that the emperor's love for her is gone. Maomao told her that it was quite the contrary, because he was the one who personally asked her to take care of her. Maomao left some advice for Lady Lihua and told her that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Also, she said that she can still charm the emperor because she is physically attractive and that she has large breasts. And to add a little extra, Maomao told her a technique she learned from her sisters at the brothel and that it would suit Lady Lihua because of her assets. Maomao returned to the Jade Pavilion and was welcomed by her fellow ladies-in-waiting. Jinshi observes her from a distance, and Gaoshun gives him a look of concern. The emperor's visits to the Jade Pavilion have decreased, thanks to Maomao for sure, and this has eased a lot of tension from Lady Gyokyo. At another place, people are burning stuff on an open fire. The flames are different hues. A eunuch thought he was cursed because of some wounds on his skin, but more about that later. At the palace training grounds, Jinshi is training with Balsam, and Jinshi wins. Later on, Jinshi asked Gaoshun how Maomao was doing, and recalled the time Maomao slapped the servant. Gaoshun seems to notice that Jinshi is concerned. Outside of the palace, Maomao is foraging some mushrooms. She wants to cook and eat them, but she doesn't want anyone to know where she found the mushrooms. Xiaolan and Maomao were hanging out, and Maomao bought a steam basket full of buns and dumplings. Xiaolan helped herself and thanked Maomao for the food. Maomao recalled her fellow servants giving her a ton of food just so she could gain weight. Maomao was tired of being overfed, so she just gave the food to Xiaolan. Xiaolan spilled the tea on some gossip at the palace about a palace servant seducing a military officer by using an aphrodisiac. Maomao remembered how Jinshi tried to seduce her with an aphrodisiac. Back at the Jade Pavilion, the quack doctor and Maomao enjoyed the matsutake mushrooms Maomao picked. They grilled them and added salt and soy paste. Suddenly, a man came in, asking the doctor for a cure for curses. He showed his hands, and there were red spots on them. He thought he was cursed because while he was burning some trash, he threw some wood tablets on the fire, and after they burned to different colors, he got the marks on his hands. Maomao begged to differ and made an ointment for him. She explained how the fire would react differently to different substances and chemicals, just like a fire would. She gave him the ointment and told him that there must be something on the wood tablets that gave him that rash. After giving him the medicine, Jinshi came in for a surprise visit. The quack was glad after seeing Jinshi and decided to make some tea for him, so he left them for a moment. Jinshi is only there to fetch Maomao as he needs her for something. After they left, the quack returned with the tea, only to find out that they'd already left. Back at the palace, Jinshi asked about what she said about the wooden tablets burning differently, although Maomao raised the white flag because this is beyond her area of expertise. Jinshi asked her for more wood tablets that were teapot steamed and returned to the Jade Pavilion. She wondered if the wood tablets were used to hide a secret or discreet communication. Maomao's fellow servants dressed her up for a garden party, an event where the emperor and his officials gather in the courtyard to enjoy food and entertainment, and this event only happens twice a year. Since the emperor isn't married yet, he needs an empress consort, so the 4 high-ranking concubines will contend for the title. The candidates are Lady Gyokuyu, the precious consort, Lady Lihua, the wise consort, Lady Lishu, the virtuous consort, and Lady Aduo, the pure consort. All of the concubines will be attending this time since Lady Luhua and Gyokuyu gave birth to their babies. That's why they were not able to attend the previous garden party. Yinghua is psyched for the garden party, as this will be Princess Lingli's first party. All officials will be attending this event, and this did not excite Maomao at all, knowing that Jinshi would be there for sure. Yinghua is also ready to help out Maomao by making herself look presentable during the event. Maomao knew that it was going to be a long party, so she made some candy that would help her during the event. Lady Hongyang saw what she was making, and Maomao even showed her custom-made warmers in her underrobe. Hongyang was fascinated by this and asked her to make some for the rest of the ladies in waiting. It wasn't long before the word spread about Maomao's pocket warmers. Even Jinshi, Gaoshun, the emperor's seamstress, and the emperor's cook asked for some. Maomao is hard at work with her garden party preparations and has practiced greetings and etiquette. Maomao is once again tired from all the work that she's been doing, and the party will take place tomorrow. Gaoshun and Jinshi were discussing the whereabouts of those individuals who had burns on their arms, but they hadn't found anyone yet. Jinshi hopes that nothing will go wrong during the garden party. It's the day of the garden party. Lady Gyokuyu is fitted out with the best clothes, and her ladies-in-waiting are all in awe at her beauty. Lady Gyokuyo gave them jewelry to mark them during the event, and Maomao got a necklace and was reminded by Lady Gyokuyo that she was her lady-in-waiting. Maomao was stunned because she never wore jewelry, and Yinghua seized this moment to grab her arms so that the rest of the ladies-in-waiting could put makeup on her. After wiping her face, they were shocked as something changed in Maomao's appearance. You'll find out more about this later on. All of the concubines gathered at the garden party, and they were all dressed to their best. Jinshi greeted Lady Lishu, and she was, of course, smitten. He's on his way now to greet Lady Gyokuyu, and he seems excited about it. Even Gaoshun noticed this, and this is probably because of Maomao. Jinshi met up with Lady Gyokuyu and complimented her entire outfit. But when Jinshi saw Maomao, he fell speechless at her beauty, especially since she was all dolled up thanks to the ladies-in-waiting. Jinshi asked if Maomao was wearing makeup, but Maomao admitted that she was wearing makeup the entire time, and the freckles were fake. This confused Jinshi, but Maomao finally explained why she had to fabricate her freckles. She didn't want to end up being assaulted or harassed. Since she grew up in a brothel with her sister, she understood that ugly girls aren't targeted usually, so the fake freckles kept her safe. She didn't experience anything like that, but she told Jinshi that she was kidnapped because they thought she was marketable, and at that time, her false freckles were already fading. After hearing Maomao's story, Jinshi felt hurt and sorry for Maomao, and he apologized for not being able to apprehend the people who kidnapped her. Maomao was over it, and he told him that it wasn't his fault, but Jinshi still apologized. He leaned closer to her and gave her his hairpin. All the other girls blushed and felt happy for Maomao, and even Lady Gyokuyo said that she was no longer just her lady-in-waiting, but also Jinshi's. The sound of the drums signified the start of the event, and all the concubines were sitting apart from one another. Their meal is about to be served, but an ominous figure is serving the dishes. It was absolutely cold at the garden party, and the cold winds proved too strong for Maomao's pocket warmers. As the celebrations continued, Maomao reminded herself that the 4 concubines were in rivalry with one another. Yinghua pointed out the Princess Dowager and that she birthed the emperor at such a young age, and his brother is too sickly to even leave the house. Although he was supposed to be at the event, he suddenly disappeared. Meanwhile, Lady Gyokuyo's and Lady Lihua's ladies-in-waiting are in a heated argument about each other's appearance. Yinghua stood her ground as the ladies-in-waiting of Lady Lihua continued insulting them. Maomao recalled how she scared one of the servants at the Crystal Pavilion, telling her that she'd have her do things to her body that she wouldn't tell her father about. Back at the present, Maomao scared the servant again by giving her a sly and terrifying smile. The servant recalled that traumatic expression by Maomao and hurriedly left the rest of the girls. Yinghua, Guiwan, and Ailan tried to comfort Maomao, but she had balls of steel and brushed the insults off her shoulder. The 3 girls admired her strong and steadfast character despite the hardships she faced in her life, and they thought of how deserving she is of Jinshi. Maomao knew they were living in fantasy again. There were a lot of proxy wars between the ladies-in-waiting. Lady Lishu and Lady Aduo's servants are each defending their master's honor. Guiwan and Yinghua had to explain the rivalry between the two concubines. Lady Aduo was the concubine of the late emperor, and Lady Lishu is the current emperor's concubine. During that time, when the previous emperor died, Lady Aduo left the palace shortly, and when the current emperor was named, Lady Aduo returned to become the current emperor's concubine. So it was like the emperor was dating both the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Lady Aduo was 30 years old back then, and Lady Lishu was 9, and it has been 5 years since the previous emperor's passing, but Yinghua cleared out the fact that it was Lady Lishu who was the previous emperor's concubine. Imagine that, a 9-year-old concubine? It's quite a weird tradition, but it has been a common practice throughout history. If that revelation shocked you, leave a comment on your thoughts about this. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Maomao and Elan were watching over Princess Lingli when Lady Lishu passed by and pouted at the two. The two understood that she was still young, and it couldn't be helped that she would feel any animosity towards other servants, especially those who served the other concubines. Maomao noticed how her dress almost looked a lot like Lady Jokuyo's, and how she thought that white would suit her title, the precious consort, better. The other ladies-in-waiting from Lady Lihua's side were shivering in the cold, and Maomao wanted to give them pocket warmers, but they were still scared of her and just ran away. Good luck with the cold, though. Later, Maomao's 3 fellow servants, let's just call them sisters at this point because they're already like family anyway. Maomao's 3 sisters commended her for the kindness that she showed to the ladies-in-waiting from Lady Lihua's side. Just then, Maomao noticed a hairpin being given to a servant. Yinghua explained that it's a way to recruit talented individuals in the flower garden, but she also said that there is also a hidden meaning. But Maomao refused to hear it any further. Later on, Maomao is approached by Li Haku, a eunuch, who hands her a hairpin. She noticed that he had a lot of hairpins on his waist and understood that he was giving them away so that other servants wouldn't feel ashamed. When he left, Maomao thought of how he had big golden retriever energy. Her sisters were excited that Maomao was getting a lot of attention, but Lady Lihua's company came, and she said that Maomao deserved more hairpins, and she gave Maomao one of hers. Her life seems to be turning around, but this attention isn't as good as you think. Her sisters are worried that a lot of people will try to recruit her. It's time to taste the dishes before handing them out to the crowd. The tasters were all nervous except for Maomao and another lady-in-waiting from Lady Aduo's side. Maomao wished that she didn't see that devilish expression on the servant's face. So instead, Maomao is excited that she'll be eating one dish that would hopefully be a poisoned one. At the benches, the officials were watching all of them closely, and Li Haku didn't enjoy it because they all looked like they were being executed. Well, in a way they kind of were. But when he saw and recognized Maomao from earlier, he couldn't help but notice her sensual expression while tasting the food. All of a sudden, Maomao detected poison in the food of the precious consort. Jinshi was late for the function, and a commotion happened. The minister got poisoned, and Jinshi saw that Maomao rushed to the well to vomit out the food she had eaten. After a brief greeting, Jinshi grabbed her by the hand to take her to the infirmary. Maomao is still fantasizing about finishing the entire soup and getting poisoned completely. And when she asks for the rest of the soup, Jinshi calls her an idiot. He told her that someone had drunk the soup, and it became a huge deal. Luckily, Maomao prepared an emetic medicine to help expel the food from the body. Jinshi took it and still tried to take her to the infirmary. Maomao noticed that he had a new hairpin and thought maybe that was the reason why he was late at a party. Some guy tried to win him over. She also noticed how he was acting more maturely, which she liked a bit. Back at the palace infirmary, Maomao vomited a whole lot, while Gaoshun and Jinshi just watched. Maomao is amazed at the drugs that the palace infirmary has. They're really strong and effective. After clearing everything out of her stomach, Maomao wanted to see Lady Lishu regarding what happened at the event. Jinshi, Gaoshun, and Maomao came by, and Maomao noticed how Lady Lishu was itching. Maomao pulled up her sleeve and revealed a terrible rash. She already figured out that she has food allergies, particularly to mackerel. She was able to figure this out based on her reaction earlier. The servant from earlier was also there. Maomao prepared a list of foods to avoid as a countermeasure to whatever the servant was trying to pull off. Maomao handed it to her with the same threatening aura she showed the servants of Lady Lihua. It proved to be effective, though. Later on, Jinshi tried questioning Maomao about what happened earlier and why Maomao called in the food taster. Maomao already knew that Lady Lishu was the target, and Jinshi caught on despite Maomao being cryptic about it. After she left, Gaoshun thought of how this could be related to the wood tablet incident, but the previous lady-in-waiting they questioned had no burns either. The next day, Maomao dreamt of her dad, and woke up wondering if he'd be okay. Maomao remembered that her sisters were concerned after the garden party incident and sent her straight to bed. It's a good thing, though, because she was able to get a good amount of sleep. She's worried that she won't be able to go without her makeup anymore. As she faced Lady Gyokuyo, she felt uncomfortable without her makeup, and the concubine allowed her to put on her fake freckles again. She also told her that Gaoshun was outside pulling weeds, and Maomao thought that he also had a manly charm with the other ladies. Maomao asked to use the parlor, and Lady Gyokuyo instructed Hongyang to assist her. Hongyang was a lot more excited than usual. Maomao and Gaoshun discussed what happened previously, and presented to Maomao the soup bowl of Lady Gyokuyo. After analyzing it further, she asked him if he touched the bowl, but he said that he didn't, and just wrapped the whole thing in cloth. Maomao thought of an idea on how to investigate who poisoned the food. She made a makeshift fingerprint powder, and fingerprints can be detected because silver corrodes easily. After much observation, Maomao thought of the food taster as one of the culprits of the incident, and she was able to deduce that 3 people touched the bowl: the cook, the server, and the food taster. There was also a 4th person who touched the rim of the bowl, and Maomao believes that this person poisoned the food. Gaoshun is curious as to why the taster's fingerprints are on the bowl, but Maomao said that the taster swapped the food for Lady Lishu, not knowing it was poisoned. Maomao also explained that Lady Lishu has been harassed throughout the event and probably even before that. Maomao thought of how the ladies-in-waiting should help their concubine be at their best appearance, especially in times like these. But unfortunately, they did the opposite. A concubine should wear clothes that don't clash with other concubines, and as a matter of fact, she should also wear the same color as her lady-in-waiting. Her servants did her dirty by giving her pink attire instead of white, which they wore and made her appear stupid in front of everyone. Maomao even recalled the proxy war the ladies-in-waiting had at the party. Apart from the food issue, Maomao believes that Lady Lishu's servants are bullying her, and that she's unaware that her people are doing her dirty. Maomao explained, too, why this is happening. Since Lady Lishu became a concubine at the age of 9 and left when the emperor died, this is a unique case of being a concubine. When she returned to become the concubine of the current emperor, it was an act of indecency beyond words. At least that's how most women see it. Maomao explained how the culprit stirred the poison by holding the edge of the bowl. And according to Hongyang's basic etiquette training, a servant must never touch the edge of the bowl where their master places their lips. Gaoshun noticed that Maomao tried to protect the food taster, Lady Lishu. Maomao explained that the life of a food taster is not really what it seems and is quite worthless and expendable. Gaoshun understood and told her that he'd be reporting to Jinshi now. Maomao regrets not swallowing the entire soup. Jinshi and Gaoshun talked about the situation. Jinshi envies Gaoshun's calm and collected behavior in situations like these, while he's stressed out as he doesn't have any time to sleep or even change clothes because of this problem. Gaoshun said that because of this stress, his natural self is showing even more. Gaoshun also reminded Jinshi of his hairpin, and that it's quite a unique one, so he should take care of it. Jinshi just asked him to keep it for him. Maomao and Xiaolan are hanging out at the rear palace, and Xiaolan asked if she got any hairpins from the garden party, and that if she did, she could get out of the rear palace now. Maomao wanted to know more, so Xiaolan explained that the hairpin also signifies that whoever gives it to her will be able to get her in and out of the palace. At the training grounds, Li Haku received a message to meet up with Maomao at the Jade Pavilion. Li Haku thought that no one would take his consolation pins seriously, but apparently someone did. Li Haku went to the Jade Pavilion and met up with Maomao. She goes straight to the point and says that she could go home if he vouches for her, and Li Haku is stunned by the audacity of Maomao. But since he outranks her, he says that he's not just someone whom she can just ask for favors for. Maomao bought out the big guns and presented him with vouchers for a flower viewing session at the Verdigris house, the brothel where Maomao's sisters worked. Li Haku was surprised that she had these and knew that that brothel was a high-end one. Maomao even sweetened the deal. She even told him that he could meet Perrin, Joka, and Meimei, her sisters, dubbed the 3 princesses of the Verdigris house. Li Haku refused to believe it, because even the high-ranking officials wouldn't be able to afford one night with them. Maomao flexed a bit and showed him 2 more hairpins, so she could just go to someone else in case he refused. Li Haku got scared of Maomao because of her connections with officials who outrank him. In the end, Li Haku gave in. Her sisters back at the Jade Pavilion were proud of her that she'd be able to go out of the palace. Maomao is being nonchalant about it, but she doesn't know what the hairpin entails. Even Hongyang is worried for her, and Lady Gyokuyo thinks that a certain someone would be frustrated when he finds out that Maomao left with someone else. Just then, Jinshi sneezed from his office as this conversation was taking place. Lady Gyokuyo is thrilled about the face he'll make when he finds out. Sure enough, after Jinshi finished his work, he had time to rest, and that was when Maomao had already left. When Lady Gyokuyo reported this to him, Jinshi was in shock, and she said that she'd be gone for 3 days. Maomao was able to get out of the palace and went to see her sisters first at the Verdigris house. She was, of course, accompanied by Lihaku and was welcomed by Madame Maomao's grandma of sorts. After a kick in the stomach, Maomao vomited all of the poison she had ingested previously. Lihaku asked if she was okay, but Maomao is used to this tough love treatment. Madame then asked one of the servants to fetch Perrin and prepare some tea, as they had a guest. Maomao asked if Lihaku's arm muscles were strong. Lihaku boasted his big biceps and was later accompanied inside the brothel. Madame is frustrated that Maomao didn't even try to visit them, but Maomao explained that she had no choice about the matter and even sent her a letter regarding her situation. Maomao paid for Lihaku's time, but the payment wasn't going to cut it, so Madame said that she'd just put it on her tab. Maomao knew she couldn't afford to pay off her tab, but Madame just told her to bring in more young customers, and she may consider having her debt repaid. Madame asked Maomao to visit her dad immediately. Maomao made her way across the pleasure district. It was a sight of poverty. There were rough shacks, beggars, and streetwalkers everywhere you looked. Maomao finally made it home and greeted her dad, Luomen. She told him everything that happened to her at the palace. Maomao told her dad that she still had a term as a servant and would be back at the rear palace in 2 days. She said that she needed a bath, so her dad told her to just go to the Verdigris house tomorrow to freshen up. After hearing that she works at the rear palace, Maomao's dad thinks of what a twist of fate it is that she's there right now, and this could mean a lot of things. Either something happened by chance or something unfortunate happened. The next day, Maomao woke up and forgot that she had visited her home. She went over to the fields where Luomen worked. She wishes that he had retired already, but she knows how much he loves the medicines he makes out of the herbs on his farm. Just then, a little kid is banging on their door, and before Maomao can even say anything, the little girl drags her along. It seems that she needs some help with something. They made their way through the brothel, and Maomao found 2 bodies, a male who was not breathing and a female who was having difficulty doing so. She slapped herself to wake her up and got to work. She asked the servants around for some help and started doing chest compressions. Eventually, they got into a more stable state. After the incident, the 2 courtesans asked what happened, and Maomao suspected that they were poisoned. After hearing this, the 2 proceeded to leave Maomao to make some tea. Later on, Maomao did some more investigation. There were 2 bottles of tobacco and some wheat sticks, although she was not quite sure what those were for. The little kid who dragged her came by and bought the charcoal, and Maomao asked for some writing tablets. She asked the kid to send it to her father later on, but as the kid was leaving, she looked at Maomao with a stern face. Luomen arrived and asked her about the medicine preparations. Maomao already had them ready. After that, he checked the room. Maomao knows that her father is far better at deducing the cause of sickness in a person, and after his careful observation, he was able to deduce 1 or 2 things, but he didn't want to make it easy for Maomao, so he asked her what kind of poison she thought it was. Maomao locked in and said that they were poisoned by tobacco. Luomen made sure that she had her own understanding of things. That's why he never spoon-fed her his lessons. He asked her if she had them drink water. She didn't, because this would make things worse. But if the leaves in the tobacco were directly soaked in water, then this would make it less poisonous. Another lesson learned by Maomao. Maomao and her dad met up with the head lady of the brothel. She gave them some snacks, which are usually reserved for customers, and tea. Maomao saw the wheat sticks earlier, which are actually drinking straws after she saw her use them to drink tea. The old woman gave her a small amount of money for the trouble. At first, Maomao's father hesitated and refused to take the money, but he accepted it after being asked by Maomao if he'd be able to pay his rent. It crossed Maomao's mind that it could have been a double suicide, which is not a rare thing in the pleasure district. A man who cannot afford to buy a courtesan, and a courtesan with time left on her term, and usually people like that decide to end their lives. Maomao noticed that the man is well-dressed and handsome. It was quite unusual for someone of that stature to commit suicide for those reasons, but Maomao knew that Luomen didn't like it when she judged through stereotypes. Maomao went to check on the male patient, and she got there just in time too. The little kid is about to stab the man, and Maomao gives her a good headbutt to stop what she's doing. One of the courtesans saw them and asked Maomao if they could talk. The courtesan told Maomao that the man was a regular customer who usually bought out the courtesans. He'd sweet-talk them at first, but after he got tired of them, he just dumped them and went for the next one. A lot of people tried to kill him and even poison him. A lot of people loathe him, but since he's the son of a rich merchant, he's pampered and well-protected and settles all affairs with money. Recently, the man asked his father to hire some bodyguards to go with him whenever he goes to a brothel. The little girl's sister, who was a courtesan, got dumped by him. She was so happy that she would be living with him. But when the day of the buyout came, he canceled at the last minute. That's why the little girl couldn't forgive him. The courtesan, who was also poisoned, is close to this man, so it was a double suicide. Maomao realized why they were offered some snacks. It's also to keep what happened a secret, because a rumor of a double suicide happening in a brothel is bad for business. Maomao also thought of the kid, and how it must have been unfair for her to see the man live. Luoman and Maomao went back home. Maomao counted the money they were given, and sure enough, there was hush money for the incident. What Maomao couldn't figure out was why the little girl would go out of her way to find her, and why would the man, knowing his character, commit a double suicide if he could just dump the woman that she was with. Luoman advised her to be more rational in her thinking, and not to speak based on incomplete information. Maomao recalled the previous things that happened in the brothel, and she was able to conclude that it wasn't a double suicide, but rather an intent to murder someone. Before she could still draw any further conclusions, Luoman stopped her and told her that it was already over. Maomao thought of the whole thing as she walked the district. The woman had the man drink poisoned water, but for him to do so, she had to drink the water as well, to make him believe that she wasn't plotting to kill him. The woman poured the water in two different ways, with the poisoned one on top and the clean water at the bottom. Once she was able to drink the bottom part using the wheat straw, she let the man drink the poisoned water on top without a straw. To decrease any suspicion of murder, she later drank a little bit of the poisoned water, just enough for her to be sick, but not die. She did this in the morning so that it would be most likely that the man would die. She's pretty cunning and clever for a courtesan. Maomao thought that the entire brothel was in on the attempt, from the servant kid who took her time to make sure that the man wouldn't be able to recover, and she even bought an apothecary in a brothel instead of an actual doctor, to how the other courtesan is sympathetic to the kid, and how the headmistress is very quiet about what happened. But then again, Maomao remembered Luomen's advice to not speak in conjecture. Maomao walked through the pleasure district, thinking about how people eat the poison around them, especially courtesans who become sweet little poisons themselves. Maomao was finally able to take a bath, but she still thought of how the rear palace and the district were not that far apart. She thought that she wouldn't be able to live in the neighborhood if she worried about a lot of things. Maomao accompanied her in her bath and told her that Jaka, Perrin, Madam, and a lot of the people there missed her. Unfortunately, she still has 1 year left on her term before she can finally be free. Maomao asked if she visited the annex, and Maomao said that she'd visit later. Maomao is off, and he has gone back to the palace. Lihaku is all giddy. Even though they're leaving the district, Perrin is still teasing Lihaku, and all of his manly personality goes out the window. Madam whispered to her to inform her when she would be coming back. Maomao already knew that she was expecting a new customer. Back at the palace, Jinshi gave Maomao the coldest stare. Every one of her sisters in the Jade Pavilion wanted to know what happened. Maomao made her escape by saying that she'd go and change her clothes, but Jinshi just stopped her and said he'd be waiting at the parlor. Gaoshun shook his head out of embarrassment. After that, Jinshi and Maomao met in the parlor, and Jinshi couldn't stop tapping his foot in front of her. Maomao is hoping that he's not upset and that she's not overthinking it. After a brief and awkward update from Maomao, Jinshi asked how Lihaku was. She said that he was all right, and he was giving out consolation hairpins to most maidens anyway. Jinshi thought of this as an insult, and he lost to a consolation prize. Jinshi asked why she didn't choose him to accompany her outside of the palace. Maomao thought that bringing Jinshi would mean trouble, so she'd rather avoid that. But to cover herself, she told him that she didn't know how to repay him anyway. And when Jinshi asked how Lihaku was repaid, Maomao said that she granted him a night of blissful dreams. Maomao's explanation was taken completely out of context by Jinshi, who said that he dropped his cup of tea and just stood there, frozen. After leaving the premises, Hongyang, Gaoshun, and Lady Gyokuyo were outside eavesdropping. Hongyang gave her a whack on the head, while Lady Gyokuyo just laughed out loud and Gaoshun frowned, knowing that he'd probably hear about this later from Jinshi. In a tavern, a palace official is on a bender and wants more booze. Other officials were talking about how sour his mood is and how it's ruining the atmosphere. While they were laughing at him, another man slipped something into his drink and gave it to him. Back at Jinshi's office, Jinshi is still sulking about what happened with Maomao. Gaoshun knows that Jinshi never acts like this, especially over a girl. Gaoshun remembered how difficult it was to ask Lady Jokyu to stop laughing and explain the situation. Fortunately, she was kind enough to clear up the misunderstanding that Maomao rewarded his guarantor with a time with a known courtesan. Gao Shun is surprised that Maomao is well connected, but he worries about the images Jinshi conjures up in his head, especially when he gave a great deal of effort to finish his work quickly to welcome back Maomao. Jinshi has a ton of work to do, and one of the things he's working on are bills that need to be passed. Gao Shun sighed at the sight of the bills the bureaucrats were trying to pass, as these were written for their benefit anyway. Nighttime came, and a servant came running into Jinshi's office and informed him of Sir Kunan's death. Jinshi and Gao Shun rushed immediately to investigate the situation. He came by the next day to the Jade Pavilion, and Lady Gyokuyo expressed her deepest sympathies. Maomao is unsure of whether she should feel sorry, though, as this is someone that she never met, and he's someone who died drinking too much. Jinshi, however, had his doubts and asked Maomao if it was alcohol that killed his old acquaintance. Maomao stated that excessive alcohol consumption can lead to death. Jinshi said that he was at a party with his friends and that he knows how Kunan takes his alcohol, so death from overindulgence of alcohol is already ruled out in Jinshi's mind. Jinshi presented the cup Kunan drank from and poured some alcohol for Maomao. Her face lit up, but after tasting it, her mood switched immediately. The alcohol tasted sweet and salty at the same time. Jinshi told her of how Kunan used to love spicy food, but one day he developed such a sweet tooth that almost all his meals became sweet. Maomao said that it could lead to diabetes, but Jinshi asked her to let him remember his friend just for a bit and not spoil the nostalgia. Maomao asked if they could still recover the broken alcohol jar from the crime scene. It looks like Detective Maomao is on the case again. Maomao wanted them to look into something else for them. Upon further investigation of the broken vase, Maomao was able to conclude that the alcohol Kunan drank got laced with a ton of salt, so much so that it left crystals on the surface of the vase. After reading the report given to her by Gao Shun, Maomao realized that Kunan's taste for salt had disappeared. Furthermore, Maomao read about his life and found out that he's a skilled bureaucrat and a stoic person. After losing his wife and child to an epidemic, all he did from that point on was just work, eat sweets, and drink. Maomao also mentioned that stress or an imbalanced diet can potentially eliminate one's sense of taste. Basically, stress can lead to serious illnesses. She also pointed out that the drink she tried the other time was also salty. Therefore, someone had the intention of putting salt in all of the alcohol. There were many culprits at that party, and since they didn't like Kunan because he takes his job and his drinking way too seriously, they decided to put in salt as a prank, hoping he would notice. But since he can't taste the salt, this backfired and led to his death. Jinshi whispered something to Gao Shun, and then he left. Maomao felt like a coward after not directly pointing out the culprit because he didn't want anyone to get punished, especially if the culprit hadn't been determined yet. Maomao noticed he was wearing an obsidian tassel, a sign that a person is still mourning. She asked if Kunan was important to him, and Jinshi said that Kunan was the one who helped him when he was young. After looking at Jinshi's state, Maomao noticed his humanity and a difference in his character. Jinshi, of course, didn't want Maomao to notice this and went back to his flirty antics. He even gave her a bottle of booze. Jinshi went close to her face again and told her that she didn't seem ungrateful. Maomao asked if he was supposed to be working right now. Jinshi was caught slacking off, and Maomao pushed even further by asking him what he was working on. Jinshi got back at her by saying that he was working on a certain bill to be passed, where the age of alcohol consumption should be bumped up to 20 years old. Maomao begged him to not pass that bill, but it was not up to Jinshi whether or not that bill would be passed. Later that night, a servant fell into the water and drowned. We'll find out later what happened. If you're enjoying the story so far, hit the like button and leave a comment down below. The next day, the corpse was found, and Gwen, whom Maomao refers to as the quack doctor, and Maomao were called to examine the dead body. Gwen is shaking on his knees after seeing the dead body, but Maomao is able to check it and ask a few questions to the one who reported the dead body. This individual was found floating in the outside moat. Jinshi arrived at the scene and asked Maomao why she wouldn't touch the corpse. Maomao explained that she was taught by her mentor and father, Luomen, not to touch corpses as they can become medicinal ingredients too, and knowing Maomao's curiosity, he strictly forbade her from touching any grave or any dead body. Jinshi understood and asked Gwen to make a proper autopsy of the body. Jinshi and Maomao talked about how that servant could have possibly died. It was reported to Jinshi that she may have climbed the wall and thrown herself in the moat. In short, she may have committed suicide. Maomao refuted this claim, as the palace walls are tall, and she would need a ladder if she wanted to climb the walls, so she couldn't have done that alone. Maomao reminded Jinshi of the ghost that appeared in the palace walls. It was Lady Fuyu who climbed the walls using the protrusions from the bricks. Although it may be possible that the servant scaled the walls like that, it may have been unlikely, especially for regular women, especially those with bound feet. So they may be thinking that the incident is a murder case. Maomao reflected on death, and she thought about how she'd never try to take her own life because she still has a lot of medicines, poisons, and other drugs that she'd like to test. But if she were to die because of those experiments, then she thinks that one can't resist fate when it comes to death. Jinshi was concerned, and Maomao said that it was just like his late mentor, Kunin. Whether it was out of malice or accident, no one can tell when they'll die. The two stood silent for a moment. Maomao recalled all of the things that she encountered in the past couple of months and how close she was to death. In a way, these things did not surprise her anymore. Despite her young age, she seems to have a cynical view of the world. Out of the blue, Maomao asked a favor from Jinshi, saying that if ever she was to be executed by him, she wanted to make sure that she died by poison. Jinshi didn't like what he heard, but when he asked why, Maomao just told him that if ever she made a grave offense, Jinshi would be the one tasked with executing her. Maomao realized what she said, and she may have overstepped her boundaries, so she apologized. Jinshi, who is still upset about what she said, asked her why she would say something like that. Maomao explained that since she's just a commoner, her life is expendable and can easily be taken away even by the slightest mistake. Jinshi firmly put his foot down and told her that he would never do such a thing, but Maomao retorted that it was not about a would or would not decision, but rather a can or cannot. Maomao excused herself, leaving Jinshi feeling extremely heartbroken. Later on, Maomao heard rumors that the dead servant was at the garden party where the poisoning took place and that she left a will with some relevant content in it, so the case was considered a suicide. Back at Jinshi's office, he's still asking Gaoshun if there are any individuals with burn marks on their hands. It's been 2 months since they've been on the case, and so far, no one else has been found. Finally, one individual was on their watch, the head lady-in-waiting of Lady Aduo, Fengming. It was a cold night, and Lady Aduo was drinking from the top of the palace walls. Back in the rear palace, Xiaolan and Maomao talked about the suicide case that happened, and how the servant from Lady Aduo's side may have tarnished her name due to the things that happened during the garden party. Aduo may also lose her title as one of the 4 top consorts. Aduo had a baby with the emperor back when he was still a prince, but sadly they lost him. Maomao thought of how the rear palace female's purpose was to just bear a child. She's worried if Lady Lihua will still be able to bear a child, as well as if Lady Gyokuyu will still be loved by the emperor. She compared the life of a concubine to flowers, as they wilt over time and lose their beauty, and how the flowers of the rear palace are useless unless they bear fruit. Maomao gave her leftovers to Xiaolan, which she graciously accepted. Xiaolan is envious of Maomao's life and how she gets to take leftovers from her parties. Maomao begged to differ. Maomao returned to the Jade Pavilion, and everyone was preparing for a tea party. Maomao thought that this was all hard work. Ladu Lishu will be visiting the Jade Pavilion, and Maomao observed how everyone is on their toes, trying to read one another. Lady Gyokyu is skilled at reading people through polite conversation, and whatever information she gets, she sends it to her family since they are a family of traders. And any piece of information is valuable because they need to be up to date with the times. Maomao and Lady Lishu's taster met again, but Maomao's stare sent chills down her spine. Maomao also noticed how passive the other servants were. Sure, they weren't harassing Lady Lishu, but she still thought that they should be doing their job as ladies-in-waiting. Lady Jakuyo offered her some tea, orange peels that were boiled in honey, perfect for the cold weather. However, Lady Lishu had a nervous look on her face, and her taster noticed this. Some of her servants are talking behind her back, saying how she's such a picky eater. Of course, Maomao heard all of this and would not stand for it, so Maomao tasted the tea first. She shook her head and told Lady Gyokyu that this wouldn't pass for her. Lady Gyokyu offered Lady Lishu ginger tea instead, and she gladly accepted the offer, but her servants were being so stuffy about it, not knowing of Lady Lishu's food allergies. After the tea party, Maomao was kicked out by her sisters and was asked to take a rest. She knows how to clean too, but for some reason, she's always being given special treatment by her sisters. Jinshi was outside waiting for her and asked if the tea party went well. Maomao thought so much that this tea party was Jinshi's idea. Jinshi stopped her in her tracks, but Maomao shoved his hand away from her shoulder. Jinshi only wanted to let her know that the garden party poisoning culprit was the servant who committed suicide, but Jinshi still had doubts about it. Maomao knows where this is going, so she just told him that she's not in a position to make an opinion or even look into it. Jinshi still kept pushing and asked why a common servant would poison another concubine, particularly Lady Lishu. Maomao just shrugged, and so Jinshi flicked his hair and ordered Maomao to serve at the Garnet Pavilion starting tomorrow. Maomao followed orders. She didn't have any choice in the matter anyway. The next day, Maomao set foot at the Garnet Pavilion and noticed how the mansions were painted according to their master's colors. Lady Gyokyo's Jade Pavilion feels homey. Lady Lihua's Crystal Pavilion feels refined and noble. And the Garnet Pavilion of Lady Aduo is simple and practical, yet it was refined for nobility like Lady Aduo. Fengming, Lady Aduo's head, lady-in-waiting, greeted Maomao. She wasn't told of any specific job in particular, so she assumed that she'd only be doing basic housework and other servant work. Just then, Lady Aduo welcomed the newcomers to the Garnet Pavilion. Maomao observed her appearance, and she couldn't believe that she was 35 years old and that she had an androgynous appearance. She could be a civil servant with the way she looked. Her appearance is simple, strong, yet refined. Even the new servants swooned at the sight of Lady Aduo. Fengming led them to their first task, and Maomao, being her usual observant and vigilant self, tried to stay a little behind and pay attention to how Fengming interacted with other ladies-in-waiting. She is so far very approachable and mother-like. That's why she can easily build rapport with a lot of the servants. Their first task is to air the books out, and Fengming told them that the eunuchs can help them out if they need assistance carrying some heavy items. Maomao noticed the bandage wrapped around Fengming's left forearm. There were a lot of things in the room, so they needed to be cleared out immediately. Maomao also noticed how hard-working the Garnet Pavilion servants were, and thought of how a certain group of ladies-in-waiting could learn a thing or two from them. She's definitely not implying a certain group of servants from the Crystal Pavilion. Maomao carried all the books out and was praised by Fengming. Maomao noted her people skills and how she's good at giving positive reinforcement to her co-workers. HR departments can learn a thing or two about her. Later that night, Maomao was walking back to her bed, and Lady Fengming saw her and helped her out by giving her a thick blanket and saying goodnight. Maomao thought of Jinshi's request, and that she wasn't told to do anything specific, but she gets the sense that it's implied that she'll be investigating the culprit among the ladies-in-waiting. The next day, she's still doing a lot of housework along with the other servants. Lady Fengming is also assisting the others with their cleaning. It's very commendable that she's leading by example. Maomao wondered why she didn't decide to marry, and instead just became Lady Aduo's lady-in-waiting. She suspected her loyalty was a good reason why she had a motive for trying to help Lady Lishu. Since Lady Aduo is the one who is most at risk of being eliminated as a high-ranking concubine, another reason could also be the vacancy in the concubine position. Since Lady Lishu is still 14, she's not yet able to bear a child, and she hasn't been doing her duties as a concubine due to her youth. Maomao helped out in the honey room, and all of the jars full of honey came from Fengming's family, who owns an apiary. Maomao understands now where the sweet scent from last night came from. Just then, she saw Lady Lishu being accompanied by her taster. Maomao reported this to Jinshi the next day, and Jinshi was trying to probe more, but Maomao had nothing else to say. She didn't realize that she was doing spy work for him, so Jinshi asked another question. If any one of them could contact anyone from the outside, who would it be? Maomao assumed that it would be Fengming who would be the likely culprit because of the bandages that Maomao saw around her arm. Maomao also thought of the wooden tablets and why they blazed in different hues. It could mean something like a code, but since Fengming's character rules out any conspiracy against her, she may less likely be the culprit they're looking for, but then again, Maomao is just speaking based on her own opinion. Jinshi accepted this report for now and nodded to Gaoshun. Then he went up close again and tried charming Maomao, saying that a good child needs to be rewarded. Maomao shivered and respectfully declined the offer, but Jinshi insisted anyway and fed her honey with her fingers. Maomao couldn't escape Jinshi's perversions, and even tried asking for help from Gaoshun, who just ignored them while staring at the window. Maomao swore that he'd get laxatives in his meal later for ignoring her cry for help. As Jinshi's fingers inched closer to her, he asked if she didn't like sweets. Then it occurred to Maomao how Lady Lishu had rashes and refused to drink the honey tea and all the other incidents that happened recently. Somehow an idea struck her. Lady Gyokuyo came in just in time to stop Jinshi from feeding Maomao honey with his fingers and hurriedly ran off without a proper explanation. Gaoshun apologized on behalf of Jinshi for this tasteless prank, and Maomao said that he owes her a big time. Gaoshun understood, so Maomao asked Gaoshun a favor. Maomao is in the Diamond Pavilion and she's accompanied by Gaoshu. She wanted to speak with Lady Lishu, but Lady Lishu was dismayed that Jinshi was not with her. Before she proceeded with her question, Lady Lishu recognized her as the beautiful lady-in-waiting from the garden party. Maomao went ahead and asked if she disliked honey. Lady Lishu is surprised that she knows, but she explains to her that she has been prohibited from eating it since her childhood. The ladies-in-waiting did not like this one bit and scolded her for probing Lady Lishu. It's ironic given that they're bullying her. Maomao brought out the big guns and told them that she was in their presence because of Jinshi's orders. Lady Lishu's expression suddenly changed. As she's walking back with Gao Shun, she stops and asks if there's a way for her to get detailed documentation of the past events that happened in the rear palace. Gao Shun offered his assistance and told her that he'd check the library. Gao Shun commends Maomao for her intelligence, calm demeanor, and ability to think on her feet despite only being 17. Later that night, Maomao is reading a book that Gao Shun gave her. It accounts for some events that happened 17 years ago, such as Lady Ah Duo and the current emperor's late son. And during that time, the previous emperor and the empress dowager also conceived the brother of the current emperor. Maomao discovered that Luomen, her father, delivered the current emperor's late child. She had a hunch about this as she observed that the plants, herbs, and flowers that grew in the rear palace were the same ones that she used growing up. She thought that someone had transplanted them into the palace grounds. This also explains why he's now a doctor in the pleasure district, and he's an overqualified medical practitioner in that area, and why he walked with a limp. This is because he was a former eunuch who had a bone removed from one knee. Luomen was expelled from the palace after the death of the emperor's firstborn. The next day, Maomao went back to the Garnet Pavilion and delivered a letter to Fengming from Lady Gyokuyo. Just then, when she opened the letterbox, Fengming was surprised, and Maomao immediately asked her if they could talk. Maomao noticed that her luggage was already packed, and Lady Fengming offered her tea. Maomao asked when she was moving out, and this impressed the head lady in waiting. Maomao figured that the general cleaning in the pavilion was just an excuse because she knew that Lady Ah Duo may need to leave the palace soon to be replaced by a new concubine. Maomao interrogated Fengming, asking her if Lady Ah Duo could still give birth and what happened with her previous labor. Maomao admitted that her father was the doctor who delivered Lady Ah Duo's child, and Fengming stood up, surprised and speechless. Maomao figured out that since the Empress Dowager and Lady Ah Duo gave birth at the same time, one doctor couldn't attend to both in one night, and the Empress Dowager is given higher priority than the concubine. So when Lady Ah Duo gave birth to her child, she lost her uterus, and the child died soon after. She tried to uncover how Fengming felt, and if she felt guilty and responsible for the death of Lady Ah Duo's child. Fengming's bright smile faded, and he expressed contempt towards Maomao's father. Maomao didn't hold back and also figured out why the baby died. It was because of the honey that came from the nectar of a certain flower, which is toxic, especially to newborn children. Back then, however, Fengming wasn't aware that this was a poisonous substance for the baby. Fengming took care of the child as though it were her own, and she even asked Lady Ah Duo to take a rest and let her take care of the baby. Maomao also said that because of that child's death, the cause remained a mystery, and his father was blamed for it instead, which caused him to be expelled from the palace, and Fengming only found out the cause of the child's death later on. She kept it a secret for a while, but Lady Lishu became a liability in guarding this secret, so she tried to pressure her during the garden party. It's also known that Lady Lishu and Lady Ah Duo are really close, and to Maomao there was a codependency in their relationship, as though they were mother and child. Later on, Fengming found out from Lady Lishu that she almost died eating honey as a baby, but to make sure that Lady Ah Duo never hears her story and possibly connects her to the death of her baby, Fengming chased her away from the pavilion and prevented her from meeting the concubine. When the emperor died, Lady Lishu was forced to leave the rear palace, though she never knew why. Although Lady Lishu was kicked out, she returned to the rear palace as a high-ranking concubine and a threat to Lady Ah Duo's status. So to protect Lady Ah Duo's rank and to prevent her secret from being exposed, she tried to poison Lady Lishu at the garden party. Fengming tried to negotiate with Maomao, but Maomao refused. She respects Lady Ah Duo too much because of how she carries herself as a high-ranking concubine. She holds her in high regard, but she realizes what she did, and she feels shame. She remembers back then that Lady Ah Duo asked her servants to not blame themselves, all while looking extremely depressed. Fengming knew that Ah Duo cried to sleep each night and couldn't bear the weight of her actions. She knelt and cried. That's why she worked hard, with everything that she had, to at least make up for her mistakes. Maomao couldn't relate to how she was feeling, but she knew that she sacrificed everything for Lady Ah Duo, and she didn't take her time to find a partner either. Maomao couldn't bear being close to someone, as she feared what would happen if she hurt them. She also knows that once she reports this to Jinshi, Fengming will be executed. Maomao suggested to Fengming that she just take her two motives and make them into one. Although it won't change the outcome, this is still the best possible option. Maomao returned to her bed and rested. The next day, Jinshi found out that Feng Ming had turned herself in and suspected that Maomao had something to do with it. Jinshi already knows that she and Gao Xun investigated a few things, but Maomao said that she found nothing. Jinshi also finds out Feng Ming's motive for trying to poison Lady Li Shu, and that's to secure Lady Aduo's rank as a top concubine. However, Lady Aduo will be transferred to the detached palace in the south, and this decision was made years ago by the emperor. Maomao noticed the vase full of flowers in the room. She picked one and sucked the bottom of the flower. Jinshi did the same and tasted the sweet nectar, but Maomao told him that it was poisonous. Jinshi spat the whole thing out, and Maomao said that it wasn't lethal. Maomao thought about how she helped Feng Ming, and that even though she'd be executed, she can still hide the fact that she accidentally killed Aduo's child. That night, Maomao couldn't sleep, so she decided to take a walk. She climbed on top of the palace walls and tried to get some fresh air. Feng Ming was already executed, and Lady Aduo is set to move to the detached palace by tomorrow. Just then, Lady Aduo met Maomao and asked her to join her for a drink. Maomao was excited and surprised by Lady Aduo's masculine personality. Lady Aduo told her of how she just become the emperor's friend after she lost her child, and that she never wanted to be a concubine, but she never knew why she stayed. She mourns the loss of Feng Ming and the death of the servant. Lady Aduo knew about it, and Maomao wondered if Feng Ming was the one who helped her set it up. Maomao realized how much Feng Ming was willing to sacrifice for the person she respected the most. Maomao climbed down, but as she was doing so, someone yelled at her and she slipped and fell. Luckily, she landed on Jinshi, who was just buzzed out drunk. She asked if he drank, but he told her that someone invited him to drink and kicked him out later on. Maomao is surprised that someone would do that to him. She struggled to leave, but Jinshi asked to stay a little longer, and he cried. He needed to feel warm, so Maomao just let him hug her for longer. It was Lady Aduo's day of departure from the rear palace. Jinshi is the one in charge of taking the crown from her for safekeeping, but she also realized what Lady Aduo said last night, that her son left her and not died. To Maomao, this could mean that Lady Aduo's child is still alive and that the babies of the Empress Dowager and Lady Aduo were swapped. Lady Aduo is the daughter of a nurse and a friend of the prince. She realized that her son would live a better life as the Empress Dowager's son, so she may have swapped their babies for that reason. Well, she's also not in the right state of mind after giving birth to a child. That resulted in her son surviving and living a good life. But what if people noticed that the babies were swapped right after the death of the other child? Maybe that was the real reason why Luoman was physically punished for not noticing that the babies were swapped. If that were the case, it would explain why the emperor's younger brother is in a delicate position and why Lady Aduo still decided to stay in the rear palace, despite her principles. But Maomao shrugged this off and thought that it was a ridiculous theory. But hey, it makes a lot of sense to me. Just then, Lady Li Shu ran towards the Lady Aduo, with her taster chasing after her and her 3 ladies-in-waiting just walking, indifferent to the whole situation. Lady Li Shu tripped, and Lady Aduo came to comfort her and say her goodbyes. Maomao noticed how she was motherly-like towards the little concubine. Maomao walked away from the scene and towards the palace as the gray skies brewed up a storm. Back at Jinshi's office, Gao Xun presented Feng Ming's family and her connections. Jinshi sighed and remembered Maomao's story about being kidnapped and sold off as a slave, but it seemed that he was having second thoughts about it. He understands Maomao's mindset towards the social classes and how separated they are, and since she's in no position to make any decisions, she just obeys whatever order is given to her by people of authority. Jinshi remembered their conversation about Maomao's wish that she'd be executed for any reason, and Jinshi didn't like that as it could really happen to her because of this incident. He could give the order to have her leave the palace or be executed. Either that or he could cover it up and keep her in the rear palace. But what if she doesn't want to stay in the rear palace anymore? And what if she found out that her sins were covered up to keep her there? Jinshi fears that she'll lose her soon. Gao Xun spoke of how she has been an asset to them all this time, and that gave Jinshi something to think about. The next day, Maomao and Xiaolan were talking about the mass firing that was happening in the rear palace right now. All the daughters of parents who did business with the family of Feng Ming will have to resign. There was a lot of panic among the other servants, and even Maomao feared that she might get fired too. The worst-case scenario is that if she comes home to Madame empty-handed, she might get sold off too. Maomao ran off to different places in the palace. She remembers that her family is registered as a merchant family that conducts trade. She worries that her family may have a connection to Feng Ming's family. Maomao ran everywhere and was exhausted. She came across Jinshi and wanted to talk to him. He knew that this was about the mass firing that was about to happen. Jinshi knows what she wants to know, so she gives her the registry. Maomao really enjoyed the life she has now, despite being a lady-in-waiting, but she has no position to request not to be fired. She didn't want to beg, so she kept her composure and told Jinshi that she'd follow whatever order he had. Jinshi knows that she wants to stay, but he hopes that she speaks out of her free will and does not just follow orders. Maomao's reverse psychology backfired, and she got laid off. Jinshi promised to pay as much as he could. Maomao packed her stuff and left the rear palace. Jinshi is all depressed, and Gaoshun starts to take notice of it. He asked why he didn't stop her from leaving, but Jinshi was too busy moping to even answer him. Gaoshun kept thinking of how to replace Maomao so that Jinshi could have a new girl to focus on. Even Lady Gyokuyo didn't want to help him, but he realized that Jinshi didn't treat her as a toy and that he didn't want her to stay because of how useful she was to him. He values her too much for him to just use her as a tool to solve his problems. Maomao is back at the verdigris house, and her sisters are dolling her up for a banquet at a noble's place. Maomao knows that personal invitations cost a ton of money, and one night of entertainment costs a year's worth of salary for a common man. Since her sisters, the three princesses of the verdigris house, were all called at the same time, the person must be loaded. Maomao told them that she'd just support them and nothing more. Madame wanted her to become a courtesan, but she just declined. While they were traveling to their destination, Maomao told her sisters how Madame kept on offering her to become a courtesan, but she kept on declining them. She didn't know how to sing, dance, play an instrument, or read poetry. She's just your humble neighborhood apothecary and nothing more. They arrived at the noble's place, and it was an enormous house filled with expensive furnishings and ornaments. Maomao heard that they were high court officials who were friends of Lihaku. Maomao hoped that she could have at least linked her up with one of them so that her debt could be cleared. But here we are now. Maomao went to work and served drinks while her sisters danced and played music. Maomao is exhausted. She never realized that smiling all the time is tiring. That's customer service for you. Maomao noticed another guy with his head down, and he seemed unhappy. Maomao moved closer to cheer him up, but she was asked to leave him alone. She recognized the voice and realized that it was Jinshi. Jinshi complimented her by telling her that she looks different when she's wearing makeup. After finding out that she works at the brothel, Jinshi felt uneasy, but Maomao assured her that she hadn't had any personal clients yet, so Jinshi suggested that she just buy her instead. Maomao refused, but thought that it might be a good way to get into the rear palace again. Jinshi thought that she quit because she didn't like working there, but Jinshi misinterpreted it. He technically fired her. Man, depression and booze are bad for your memory. Wake up, Jinshi! Maomao told her that she liked what she did, except for the fact that she couldn't test her drugs and poisons. Jinshi laughed and remembered that it was the type of person that she was. Jinshi tried to touch her, but she moved away. Her sisters are seeing what's happening, and Maomao decides to let Jinshi touch her, but just with his fingertips. So when Maomao turned back to him, Jinshi let his finger lay on her lips. The makeup marked his finger, and he kissed it. Maomao was caught off guard and blushed when he looked at her. Her sisters saw everything, and she saw Gaoshun at the corner, just watching. She knows her sisters will not stop bugging her until she tells them about Jinshi. The next day, Maomao was in the pantry testing some new drugs when she remembered that it was exactly a year since she was kidnapped and sold off to the palace. Madame asks Maomao to check on a patient, but that person is already dead after being examined by Maomao. Maomao took a bath and remembered the rear palace again. She doesn't want to get involved in the tangle of the people's lives there, but hopes that the people there are doing well. Madame joined her in the bath, and Maomao decided to leave, but Madame asked her to stay. She asked Maomao what her plans were, and if she'd be going back to the rear palace. Maomao told her that the palace and the pleasure district weren't that different after all. Back at her home, Maomao couldn't sleep and wanted to take a walk. She grabbed her alcohol bottle and started to drink outside. It started to snow, and she still thinks about the rear palace and all the experiences and memories she made there. Despite how much she said that the two places are all the same, it's pretty clear that she has grown fond of the rear palace and the people she met there. Maomao wonders what will happen next, but the only thing that happens next is that Maomao feels cold and runs back to her house. The next day, Jinshi came by the verdigris house and paid off Maomao's debt and more. He also gave Maomao a gift, a strange plant growing out of an insect. All of that was to get Maomao out of the verdigris house and back to the rear palace. In their conversation, Jinshi is asking the emperor what he would do because he is the one taking care of his flower garden, and the emperor is referring to the girls who are in the rear palace. The things that Jinshi truly wants are always out of reach, but this time he won't hold back, and he'll use everything in his arsenal to get what he wants. Jinshi thought of how he could outperform any regular person in intellect and martial arts, but in the end, he's only granted beauty that surpasses anyone else. Since he is aware that he is still a child under the emperor, he plans to use this relationship to forge his route and oversee the rear palace. Back at the Verdigris house, Maomao's sister Maymay is showering her with a lot of makeup to take with her to the rear palace. Maomao dislikes the fact that she has to doll herself up when working at the rear palace and protests that only courtesans do that and that she just wants to work with herbs and medicine. Maymay disliked Maomao's way of thinking and told her that she should be grateful that she landed a position at the palace, so she should at least look the part. Otherwise, she'd lose great customers. Maymay's reasoning convinces Maomao, and she regards her sister as a very intelligent courtesan. She always entertains her customers through song, chess, and go. Perrin and Joka came by to say goodbye. Joka encouraged her to make a good fortune with her new job, but also slid a comment about how she can get paying customers too. Maomao just agreed and went on her way. Maomao explained what the rear palace really is. It's quite the same as a garden, but instead of plants, it's women that fill this part of the palace, and they're there to bear children for the emperor. So far, everything that she did, from becoming a lowly servant to becoming a lady-in-waiting and solving a lot of mysteries to boot, has become quite an experience for her. She got rehired by Jinshi and was swayed by his gift of caterpillar fungus. Of course, Madame was also paid a hefty sum for Maomao. She does worry about leaving her father behind, but this time she has more freedom than before. Her dad advised her to do as she liked, but she never really understood what that meant. Maomao went back home to visit her dad one last time. Luoman noticed that she was given a lot of stuff from the Verdigris house, but Maomao wanted to just pack her notebook, her mortar and pestle, and enough underwear. Luoman advised that she should only bring things that would fit the role she accepted, and that bringing objects for drug making might make people think that she's making poison, which would compromise her. He told her that she could gradually have her stuff brought to the palace once she earned her keep. Maomao had trouble sleeping and slept beside Luoman. He thinks that he'll be lonely again, but Maomao assures him that she can visit him anytime now that she's in a new position. Maomao doesn't have a mother, but she has her father, a grandmother who looks out for her, and 3 sisters. While they're not related, Perrin, Joka, and Maymay care for her like they're flesh and blood. The next day, Maomao arrived at the palace with an elegant fit, accompanied by Madame and her 3 sisters. As her sisters bade her goodbye, of course, Madame expected her to bring in good customers, so the pressure wasn't quite off yet. Jinshi is stunned and speechless to see Maomao in such an elegant fashion. Maomao and the rest of the Verdigris house said their goodbyes, and Maomao started her first day. People are noticing Maomao, and they recognize her from the Verdigris house. Maomao blamed Jinshi for all the unwanted attention. Jinshi tried to explain why she was being noticed, but he couldn't bring himself to compliment her appearance. They arrived at the palace, and even the guards were gazing at Maomao. This annoyed Jinshi, as they were delaying their entry to the palace, so he advised Maomao to bring back her fake freckles once she started working. There were rumors across the halls about Jinshi taking a courtesan from the Verdigris house. A man overhears this, and it seems like he knows something, or is familiar with the place. Jinshi, Gaoshun, and Maomao arrive at Jinshi's home, and he seems to be overprotective of Maomao from other guys. Maomao is surprised that she's going to work there. She thought that she'd be working at the rear palace, but since she was fired from that position, she couldn't go back to the same job as before. She's rehired in the outer court now, which is outside the rear palace. Surien, his attendant, welcomes Jinshi, and she seems to know about her, but she calls her Xiao Mao. Maomao glared at Gaoshun because she knew that he was the only one who called her that. Surien gave Maomao the grand tour and led her to his room. After the tour, Maomao settled in her room, and it's quite similar to the one she stayed in when she was working at the Jade Pavilion. Jinshi discussed with Maomao what her work would be specifically and handed her a ton of books for her to study as she would take the court lady exam. The next day, Maomao put on her fake freckles and went to the kitchen to help out Surien, but she was already done, so she just helped her serve the food. Maomao noticed that there were no servants, and Surien explained that she handled all personal matters and that the servants only took care of the office. Jinshi is very particular about the food he eats, so Surien handles this all by herself. Other girls stayed there, but they didn't last. Surien even told Maomao about the previous girls finding unfamiliar underwear in their closet. Moreover, underwear is made of hair, and Maomao shuddered upon hearing this. Maomao and Surien delivered Jinshi's breakfast. Jinshi is only in his bedrobe, and the top of his body is almost showing. Maomao thinks of how much of Jinshi's sex appeal is wasted, but she now understands why only Surien and Gaoshan are allowed in his quarters. Jinshi's appeal can drive any woman crazy, and any man would pounce on him right away if given the chance. He was so attractive that his androgynous beauty could allure any gender. Maomao had a crazy idea of collecting Jinshi's scent and selling it as an aphrodisiac. Jinshi asked her if she wanted a better room. Maomao thought of how she could take advantage of this, but Gaoshun was watching her closely. Maomao wanted a stable with a well nearby, and Gaoshun waved his hands to tell her that it was a big no-no. Jinshi rejected her request, but hey, it's worth a try. Gaoshun and Maomao were walking outside, and Jinshi wasn't with them. Since he was tending to the rear palace, she thought that he was just loitering around, but he was pretty busy. Gaoshun told Maomao to stay away from the east side of the outer palace since it's filled with military officers. Gaoshun gave her the tour, and she passed by a lot of buildings that represent different departments. She wonders if she can learn all these places because she's not good at learning things she's not interested in, to begin with. They arrived at the Director of Waters, an official in charge of rivers, dams, and water utilization projects. Maomao's mind is elsewhere as she keeps on looking at the plants around the area and thinks of how much the rear palace has more medicinal herbs compared to the outer palace. She thought about how her father planted all of them while he was still in the rear palace. Gaoshun reminded Maomao that since she was training to be a court lady, the outer court would be her workplace. They arrived back at Jinshi's estate and met up with Surian, who was chopping up some charcoal. She asked Maomao to bring some charcoal to Jinshi's office. When Maomao left Jinshi's office, she was graced with envious glances from different girls, trying to size her up. These were court ladies, and they acted the same way as secretaries do. They're a different breed because they need to have the right qualifications, background, and education. It was nothing like the ordinary officers at the rear palace, and this explains why they also have that attitude. Maomao noticed a dirty spot in the windows and tried cleaning it when the court ladies approached her, but Maomao was busy staring at their breasts and thought that those things grow well when they're fed well. Focus, Maomao. They're trying to confront you. All of them complained about why someone like her was closely working with Jinshi. She knows that staying quiet won't stop them, so she just retorted by asking the obvious. All of them are jealous of her. That could have been worded properly, but it's too late. She got slapped by one of the court ladies. Maomao realized the mistake she made, so she tried again and asked if they were implying that she was receiving any special treatment. The court lady was taken aback, and Maomao just continued with her sarcasm, asking, how can someone so heavenly like Jinshi fall for an ugly girl like her? She implied that they were thinking that Jinshi had bad taste. Why would he go for something that would not benefit his status? Maybe he has weird or special tastes for women. Maomao's face didn't help at all. They could tell that she was being sarcastic. The court ladies were at a loss for words but denied the claim. One court lady asked why she was hired. Maomao showed them her burn wounds, although it's a self-inflicted wound as she was testing medicines again on herself. She acted like a wounded animal, telling them that Jinshi showed her mercy and gave her the job. After hearing this, all of them leave the scene, but that one maiden isn't buying it. When Maomao thought her problems were over, Jinshi and Gaoshun were just hiding behind the pillar. They heard the whole conversation and asked if she gets harassed like that a lot and why she was raising her left arm. Maomao tried to escape the conversation by saying that she was off to the next cleaning duty, and while sneaking off, Jinshi asked if she was studying for the exams, but she just escaped. Later that night, Maomao is working hard and studying for the court lady examination. She is tired and wants to take a nap, but Jinshi's gift gives her motivation. Surian barged in to ask her to keep quiet. It was the day of the examination, and unfortunately, Maomao failed, so Maomao became Jinshi's servant. While running some errands, Maomao came across a bunch of medicinal herbs in the outer palace, but what caught her attention was the small hill that was inside the courtyard. Just then, she got lightly hit at the back of the head, and the court lady from yesterday told her that she shouldn't be there to begin with. Maomao noticed a familiar scent from the lady and watched her as she walked away. Meanwhile, from a distance, another man caught sight of Maomao. Later that evening, someone handed a smoking pipe to someone else. It was winter, and a concubine was being accompanied to the palace by her ladies-in-waiting. She arrived, laid down her headpiece, and sat in her chair, feeling a bit down. Back at the Jade Pavilion, Lady Gyokuyo heard of Maomao's return and is delighted that she's working at the palace again. Meanwhile, at the outer palace, Maomao is trying to grow some medicinal plants, but her plans are thwarted by Surian, who asks if she's done cleaning the office. Maomao hurriedly got to where she needed to be and was asked by Surian not to focus on gardening. Meanwhile, Jinshi and Gaoshun are trying to resolve something that's happening with the concubines, and Maomao arrives just in time. She is informed that there is a new pure consort at the Garnet Pavilion, and the rear palace wants to educate the new concubine, and they want you to be the teacher. It was at the recommendation of Lady Lihua and Lady Gyokuyo, so she had no choice but to follow their request. She was paid a large sum, but she tried to forge the amount. Good thing Surian caught her to prevent that from happening. Jinshi tried looking at her carriage, but Maomao stopped him. Maomao is accompanied by Gaoshun and Jinshi to the rear palace, and of course, the whole female population is swooning over Jinshi's handsomeness. Maomao thought of Jinshi as some sort of mythical monster. When they got in the room, Maomao pushed Jinshi outside, as it was an all-ladies affair. Lady Gyokuyo, Lady Lishu, and Lady Lihua are in the room, along with their trusted ladies-in-waiting. The new pure consort, Lady Lulin, is also there. Maomao noticed that she donned a southern outfit, but couldn't tell where she was from. The new concubine just yawned, and Maomao assumed the emperor might spend more time with the new concubine. Maomao feels secure that not much will change at the rear palace. Maomao introduced herself, and the class was in session. Maomao handed out the reading materials among the concubines. Lady Gyokyo seemed to enjoy the book. Lady Lihua seemed intrigued. Lady Lishu fainted, and Lady Luolan seemed uninterested. Jinshi was trying to hear what they were talking about through the door, but he failed to do so, and when Maomao was finished with the lecture, she could tell that he was eavesdropping. He tried checking on them to see what happened. Lady Gyokuyo and Lady Lihua were satisfied with the lecture. Lady Lishu was still too young to understand why she needed to do that, and she kept on banging her head against the wall. But Lady Luolan just looked at her, turned her head away, and left the room. Back at the Garnet Pavilion, Lady Luolan is still awake with her maidens, and back at the outer court, Maomao is excited about the bonus that she'll receive. Just then, there's an explosion that happened in the palace area. Soldiers were rushing to where it took place, and after the fires had been put out, a man named Lakan tried investigating the incident. A smoking pipe was left behind at the crime scene. The next day, Maomao set off to do her daily duties. But before that, she wanted to be paid for the masterclass she provided yesterday. Jinshi seemed busy, so Maomao went on with her day. She tried to collect a stack of paper that was lying around and thought that it would be a waste for it to just be burned and turned into compost. Gaoshun gave her a coat due to the weather. Maomao bowed in gratitude to Gaoshun's offering of a coat, but this made Jinshi jealous because the coat was actually from him. He just had Gaoshun give it to her. Gaoshun immediately backed away and told Maomao that the coat was actually from Jinshi. Maomao thought that it was quite annoying that Gaoshun needed Jinshi's permission just to give her something, but Maomao thanked Jinshi anyway. Maomao was on her way to her next task when she noticed that, although the outer palace was bigger than the rear palace, there were hardly any herbs or medicinal plants in the area. She thought of how she'd plant them soon, so that she'd have her supply too. Just then, Maomao spotted an area with different and rare herbs and medicinal plants. Just then, she noticed Lihaku, and they talked for a moment. Maomao remembered how Lihaku was madly in love with Perrin, and was currently working hard so that she could be with him. Since he can't afford to spend time with Perrin yet, he just spends his money having tea with the other servant girls while keeping a lookout for Perrin, and Maomao never notices his presence there. He admires that he's working hard to earn his keep for her sister's love. Maomao mentioned that she was transferred from the rear palace to the outer palace. They began talking about the fire that happened in one of the buildings, and how Lihaku, along with many other officials, was investigating the incident. Maomao tried to ask if anyone was injured, and the warehouseman was the only injured individual in the fire. Maomao's curiosity, as always, got the best of her, and she got to work on checking out the crime scene. She believes that the incident was caused by an explosion, and she thinks that the other people who were on the case are suspecting arson. Also, Maomao noticed that the place that burned down was the building where the emperor was. Maomao knows that even if they're a peaceful nation, there are always barbarian attacks, political assassinations, a few bad eggs, and some force opposing the emperor. Maomao picked up a burnt potato and knew that the whole building was food storage. Maomao picked up an ivory pipe and tried piecing the stuff together. She hurriedly ran from Master Lihaku and went to another warehouse. When Lihaku caught up to Maomao, she started asking if there was anything in the room similar to the burned warehouse. Lihaku said yes, and Maomao asked for some things. Lihaku wondered what this was all about. Maomao said that she was trying to experiment, so Lihaku obliged. After some tinkering, Maomao made an actual bomb and warned Lihaku to stand back, but he didn't listen, so his face got blown off. Well, almost. Maomao then proceeded to explain how fine powders like wheat or buckwheat flour burn easily and that the explosion was caused by the ivory pipe she picked up from the previous warehouse. Someone snuck in and tried to have a quick smoke session in the previous warehouse, and when the flour caught fire, it caused an explosion. Lihaku asked how she knew all this stuff. Maomao just told him a story of how she blew up a room in the Verdigris house and Maomao just borrowed the room for her experiments, and she also recalled how she was kicked out by Madam. Lihaku didn't quite understand how the powders caused the explosion. Maomao assures him that anything strange is just something that's yet to be understood. Lihaku caught a cold after Maomao's little experiment, so she suggested that he visit Luomen so that he could get some medicine. Maomao is also trying to market his father's medicines and services, since he's not good at making himself known to other people. After leaving Lihaku, Maomao went back home, and she forgot about the pipe that she picked up from the warehouse. It seemed quite strange that a warehouseman would have a prime item in his possession, so she kept it for now. In a tavern, a man is having a bender, and he's getting unwanted attention from its patrons. We'll get to this later on. If you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button and leave a comment down below if you like the series, and if you have an anime series in mind that you want us to recap. The next day, some officers praised Lihaku for solving the warehouse incident, but rumors were spreading that a servant girl helped him out and that they talked about Jinshi's new servant. The conversation then led to the officers talking about Maomao herself. Lakan woke up from his nap and wanted to know more about Maomao. Back at Jinshi's estate, Maomao just finished arranging some flowers when Gao Shun came by and wanted to talk to her. He has another mission for Maomao. There was a record of another incident that took place a decade ago at a merchant's house, and that there were people who suffered food poisoning from eating raw pufferfish. Maomao imagined the poison and how she started to crave pufferfish. Gao Shun offered to take her to the place that serves pufferfish, and Maomao lit up. Maomao got motivated and locked in, and Gao Shun did not spare any detail in explaining the situation. He was previously involved with this case, and another colleague asked for advice as something similar happened recently. A bureaucrat ate some raw pufferfish seasoned in vinegar and then fell into a coma. Maomao was reluctant to solve this case because she thought she was already overstepping her boundaries. Gao Shun assured her that she wouldn't be in trouble for this. Gao Shun tried to bait her by telling her that there was poison involved with the case. Of course, Maomao could not refuse the offer. Maomao is curious why the pufferfish meat and skin caused the coma, when the most toxic part of the pufferfish is in its guts. Even though the circumstances were normal, Gao Shun told her that the cook claimed that they hadn't used pufferfish in the dish, both in the past and present. The two victims were also gourmands who love rare and exotic dishes. Raw fish and pufferfish were their favorites. After the incident, all the innards were found in the trash, so the dangerous parts were never served or consumed. In both cases, the cooks claimed that the pufferfish was served the night before, and that they served different fish on the day of the incident, but there were no witnesses to claim that this was true. Both victims ate all the food that was served to them, and then became intoxicated and collapsed half an hour later. Maomao needed more information despite the thorough investigation in both cases, so Maomao asked Gao Shun to find more information to help her. Maomao was deeply thinking about the case given to her when suddenly Jinshi popped out from behind her and asked what she and Gao Shun were talking about. As usual, this unexpected greeting frightened Maomao. Jinshi tried to find out what they were talking about, but Maomao avoided Jinshi and left him with Suiren, who asked Jinshi to stay still as he was doing his routine hair care. The next day, Maomao and Gao Shun met again in secret while doing her chores. He handed Maomao a notebook containing the cook's notes, where there were entries of all the dishes that the cook had served for their master. Maomao read one recipe, and the ones listed there were very vague because there are different types of fish and vegetables that are available each season. Jinshi walked in and decided to butt in. The jig was up, and he was a part of the investigation now. While Jinshi is snacking, Suiren pops out of nowhere to tell him that it's almost mealtime, so he has to stop nibbling on treats. Frustrated, Jinshi turned and stopped eating. Maomao found that the response was quite childish. Anyway, back to the investigation, Maomao found out a couple of things. The recent case happened a week ago, and Maomao thought the vegetables that the cook probably used were carrots and radishes, but Gao Shun informed her that the cooks used seaweed. Maomao had a sly look and asked permission to take a look at the kitchen where the food was prepared. Maomao walked to her carriage and asked the officer in front of the carriage to take her somewhere under the order of Gao Shun. The guy introduced himself as Balsam, isn't quite fond of Maomao, and just asked her to follow her orders while they're heading to the mansion. In the carriage, Balsam gave her instructions on what to do once they arrived. The servants would lead them to the kitchen where she could start investigating. Maomao also noticed that Balsam didn't have a good impression of her. The two arrived at the kitchen in the mansion where the incident happened, and the servant said that it hadn't been used since the poisoning incident. Maomao started her investigation, and Balsam tried to stop her. Suddenly, someone rushed to the kitchen and tried to disrupt their investigation. He even scolded the servant, but Balsam tried to stop him, stating that they'd been given permission by the mistress and that they were there for official business. Balsam questioned his motives, but in the end, he decided to just stand aside and stay out of their way. Maomao asked who he was, and the servant said that this was the master's younger brother. After the master fell into a coma and the mistress became ill from fatigue, the younger brother managed the cabin. Balsam and Maomao started searching the place. Although all the other tools were already cleaned, Maomao tried checking the ingredients and found a jar of seaweed, which the servant mentioned was his master's favorite and that it wasn't poisonous. Maomao believed him, but the younger brother asked them to leave after that. He seemed suspicious about asking them to leave, and Balsam thought that she had given up on the investigation. Maomao disagreed and showed Balsam the stash of seaweed she stole from the mansion. Maomao found it strange that the seaweed was available at the mansion, when this particular seaweed wasn't in season yet, and even if it were salted and preserved, the seaweed would expire eventually. She also thinks that it was imported from the south, and she hopes that they find the source of this ingredient. Just then, Balsam thought of something, but he kept it to himself. Maomao knew that Balsam was catching up to her theory, so Maomao just kept on doing what she was doing. Back at Jinshi's estate, Maomao presented the seaweed to Jinshi, Gaoshun, and Balsam. Maomao split the seaweed and placed it in 2 dishes with some water. Balsam did his due diligence and claimed that the seaweed was from the south and that the master never ate this particular seaweed in the winter, according to the servant. Gaoshun said that the cook claims that this seaweed is the same one they'd normally use and that it can't be poisonous. Maomao rebutted that just because it's the same seaweed doesn't mean that it's not poisonous. Maomao theorized that the seaweed is not often eaten in the south, or that a merchant tried to profit from this by selling the seaweed to the master and trying to ask some locals to make a salted version of it. Jinshi asked why it mattered, and Maomao told them that sometimes poisons can become non-poisonous. How eels are originally poisonous, but by bleeding them out and cooking them, they'd be safe to eat. The same was true with the seaweed. It had to be soaked in lime water first before consumption. Maomao told them that one of the 2 dishes had lime water while the other one didn't. Maomao took a bite and shocked the 3 guys. Jinshi is, of course, worried about her, but Maomao bought her an emetic agent, and Jinshi just swiped it off her hands and asked Gaoshun to hold her as he stuffed her with her medicine. Maomao vomited a lot, and she was disappointed as she wanted to test if the detoxification could happen overnight, but that was a close call. Maomao tried to question who imported the seaweed, and if the master imported it himself, then that was his own fault. But if he didn't, then someone else may be involved in poisoning the master. Maomao commended them for easily picking up her ideas. Maomao wanted to eat some more, but Jinshi stopped her immediately. Gaoshun confirmed that the culprit was the master's younger brother. He confessed to being the person who purchased the seaweed when Gaoshun found the place where he bought the seaweed. The younger brother felt jealous of his older brother's treatment of him, so he decided to remove him from the picture. Maomao wondered how he'd be able to learn about seaweed poisoning so quickly. Gaoshun found out that he heard this information from a person sitting next to him at a tavern. Maomao didn't buy the story, but the case is already dismissed. Maomao went back to her room and was disappointed that she wasn't able to try the seaweed, but she was excited to try and think of a way to use the gift that was given to her by Jinshi. To her excitement, she didn't realize that she bumped into Jinshi and greeted him warmly. This unusual gesture had Jinshi going nuts because he kept on slamming his head against the wall. After that, Jinshi tried to calm down, but he's been going through a lot of stress lately, and there's someone that he just can't get along with at work. Maomao is surprised that he can't get along with her. This particular person is an official from the military and is still unmarried despite being 40 years old. It came to the point that he even adopted his nephew as his son and had him handle his household. According to Jinshi, he is a weirdo. His interests are limited to Go, shogi, and rumors. He filed complaints, butts in, and keeps extending deadlines on things that need immediate decisions. And Jinshi feels like he has some animosity towards him for some reason. He's been camping in his office for a few days now. Maomao just tried to drown out whatever she was hearing and tried to avoid any more tasks involving personal problems. Maomao tried to forget what she heard, but she kept on having bad hunches about this situation. Lakan went to his office and asked Jinshi to drink with him, and Jinshi worried that his confrontation had something to do with Maomao, especially her coming from the Verdigris house. Lakan then spoke of how he had an old acquaintance at that brothel. Jinshi was caught off guard, as he thought that he didn't have any interest in romance. Jinshi thoughtlessly asked what kind of courtesan she was, and Lakan chuckled. Jinshi realized his mistake, and Lakan answered that this particular courtesan was good at Go and shogi, but Lakan could never beat her at Go. Jinshi is surprised that his master strategist was beaten at a game. He did try to buy her out, but things didn't work out in the end. 2 rich men with curious tastes endlessly tried to outbid each other. Jinshi knew that buying out a courtesan requires an insanely large amount of fortune, enough to even buy a small palace. Lakan thought of that courtesan fondly and told Jinshi how she was a strange courtesan. Of course, this meant that he became attracted to her uniqueness, but Jinshi didn't understand what point he was trying to make by telling him this story. Lakan's smile vanished as he nursed his drink, and he remembered how this courtesan would sell her skills but never herself, and that she treats her guests not as customers. Even when she was pouring tea, she had an arrogant look. She was charitable to a lowly peasant, but his excuse is that there were many other men with curious tastes who were head over heels for her, and unfortunately, Lakan is one of those individuals. Jinshi wondered if he was one of those weirdos for choosing Maomao. Lakan told Jinshi how he wanted to force himself on that courtesan once a day. He tried doing a lot of dirty tricks to make her less desirable, so that he could get her at a cheaper rate. Before he could even explain how he acted on his obsession, Lakan opened up about Jinshi's new servant girl, Maomao. He found her quite intriguing because of her knack for solving puzzles. He went on about an old acquaintance, a metalworker who was a palace purveyor. This individual died a few days ago, but he failed to name his successor, even though he had 3 kids who were also his apprentices. Unfortunately, he died before passing on his secret technique to his children. He left a puzzling will, which may be a hint, and Lakan isn't quite sure how to go about it. It seems that he's hinting that Maomao could solve this intriguing puzzle and learn the secret technique of his colleague. Jinshi said that he may need to hear the whole story before considering his offer. Maomao is still outside doing her chores, and the rain becomes a lot stronger. Jinshi and Maomao discussed another issue, but Maomao noticed how Jinshi seemed to be stressed about something, and he was having an issue with an acquaintance of his. It was the same issue about the metalworker and his inheritance to his 3 sons, and he wanted to figure out the secret technique that he'd kept hidden for years. Maomao figured this out, and Jinshi seemed to notice that she was interested in this case. As the father dies, it's said that one of the sons will take his place as the purveyor. In his will, there were instructions on how to distribute his assets to his sons. The workshop would be passed down to the eldest son, the furniture to the second, and the fishbowl to the youngest son, with a final reminder to have a tea party together, like in the old days. Maomao thought that the youngest son received such a low value in this will. Jinshi gave her the address of the workshop, which was given to him by Lakan. Maomao is set to work on the case tomorrow, but she is worried that her work will pile up once she gets back. Maomao and Balsam meet again to go to the specified address, and Balsam still insists that she follow his orders. They arrived at the mansion, and the young son was expecting them. Maomao noticed a strange rock in the house, and the youngest son led them to the workshop, but they do their work in the main house now. The shack is used as a tea house for the craftsmen. Inside, the other brothers welcomed them, and all the furniture had been placed strangely. Maomao noticed the chest drawer and how it was meticulously crafted, and steel was bolted in place at the bottom. Maomao figured out the second son when he approached her about his furniture, and of course, the eldest son was just standing there. The windows were placed peculiarly too, and even though there is enough light in the room, a chestnut tree is in the way of the light. A mark on top of a table is seen by Maomao as if something had been placed there for a long time. The eldest spoke and asked if they could figure out what he had left for them. Balsam asked to elaborate, and the eldest said that they were handed down these things, but not the secret technique. Maomao assumed that all the mementos had some value. Even the furniture can't be opened with the key that was left by the second son, and the actual key is missing. The eldest agreed and asked how he'd be able to have the shack if the furniture couldn't be moved. The youngest son tried to speak, but they noticed his glass fishbowl and envied him that he could sell it off and get a good price for it. The two didn't like what they got, but a woman came into the room and reprimanded them for their attitude towards their guests. This is the mother of the 3 boys. She told Maomao and Balsam how the middle and eldest had such a cynical point of view about the world, while the youngest was too timid to even express his opinions, and how her husband was always worried about them until he died. They were given tea and all of the sons sat down, but it seemed that they always knew where to sit at the table. It was probably out of habit not to block the window. If the sunlight reached the furniture, then it might have reached the chest, but there were no signs of sun damage. Maomao noticed how the sunlight doesn't come in for too long. Maomao examined the furniture and peered through the keyhole of the center drawer, and she noticed that there was something stuck inside of it. Balsam approached her, and Maomao noticed how he looked similar to Gao Shun. Maomao asked about the center drawer, and the second son told her that it used to open, but got stuck after their father worked on it. He was told that if the lock got broken, it would break whatever was inside of it, so forcing it open wasn't an option either. Maomao thought of all the things that were considered in the will, and she had an idea. Maomao asked about the fishbowl and if it used to be placed by the window. The son said yes, and there used to be a goldfish in the fishbowl. Maomao went off and Balsam tried to stop her, but she just told him that she'd get some water. When she got back, she filled the fishbowl with water, and the pattern was supposed to face toward the furniture. The sunspot concentrated on the lock and burned something in it. Maomao asked the second son to try and unlock the drawer again. Maomao asked if their father suffered from stomach aches, anemia, depression, and nausea. Sure enough, the youngest son said that he did. Maomao followed up by asking if they use solder in the workshop, and they do too. Maomao figured that the heat from the sunlight was used to melt an ore into a key mold, and that key was used to open the other 3 drawers at the top, which contained lead ore, tin ore, and another ore, which is the same one she saw at the entrance. The 2 sons were upset about their father's craft. Maomao remembered her father's words about how techniques should be seen and stolen, but she tried doing that to Luoman's medicine and ended up poisoning herself. The youngest son seems to be the only one who understands their father, and Maomao knows some things about metal making and how the light from the fishbowl melts the ore, but its heat is very low. Maomao figured out as well that the 3 drawers, which were sized differently, represented the ratio in which the ores must be mixed, but she didn't want to comment on that. The 2 sons were frustrated and tried to leave. The youngest son stopped them and told them that their father left a will that would help them get along, and that he wanted the 3 of them to work together again. But the brothers were too cynical to understand what he was trying to say. They envied him, as he was favored more by their father, and he was talented when it came to the craft. The youngest denied this, and told them how his father trusted the 2 more. His father commended Chang, the eldest, for his accuracy and calmness, and relied on him not to make any mistakes. Tsu, the second son, is good at getting to know people and is friendly with everyone. Their father viewed them equally, but they never knew this. Balsam and Maomao went to take their leave, but before doing so, Maomao told the youngest son about his father, and that if ever they felt unwell, they should go and visit him. Back at Jinshi's office, Lakan confirmed that the matter has been resolved, and that the youngest son is the most skilled after all. Jinshi realized that Lakan knew about the youngest son. The youngest will now take his father's place and will begin selling his metalwork to the palace. The 2 older sons are no longer going to work as craftsmen. The eldest will take care of the bookkeeping, while the second son will find new clients. The siblings are working together to help the family from different angles. Jinshi didn't know what happened, but understood enough that Maomao needed to keep quiet about the situation. Lakan commended the late metalworker's craft and said that although it was a simple metal part, if used on a ritual utensil, it would look fabulous. Jinshi is quite uninterested and annoyed at the drunken Lakan. Jinshi tried asking something, but was cut off by Lakan, and he said that those with talent should be in the spotlight. He may be implying that Maomao should be exposed more for her ingenuity and wit. Jinshi asked him to continue the story about the Courtesan, and Lakan told Jinshi to ask for that part of the story from someone else who would know about the verdigris house. Of course, he's implying something about Maomao. Lakan went and hurried off, but he left a jar of alcohol, asked to give it to his serving maids, and left. Gaoshun wanted to ask something from Jinshi. Later that night, Maomao was called into Jinshi's presence and asked if she knew anything about makeup and wanted to ask for Maomao's help in putting some makeup on him. Jinshi wanted Maomao to do his makeup, although Jinshi didn't need it. At least that's what Maomao thought. There were a lot of wars that were caused by silly reasons, like the beauty of a woman. Maomao thought he was trying to topple a nation because adding makeup would just transcend his beauty even more, but Jinshi just wanted to put freckles on his face, and Maomao realized that he was trying to be a little less beautiful. She showed him the makeup she used to add freckles to her face, made out of dried clay and oil. Maomao can make these overnight, and Jinshi wishes there was a drug to change his face. Maomao suggested that he needs to apply lacquer to his face, but that would have a permanent effect on his appearance. Maomao had a different solution to disguise Jinshi. Later that night, Maomao went to work making the makeup, and she made a big batch of it just in case. It was dawn, and Maomao walked to Jinshi's quarters in the cold morning, only to find him doing his usual care routine, which made Maomao cringe a bit. Maomao doubts that her plan will work if Jinshi keeps on looking his best, so Jinshi let Maomao take the lead with her plan. She knelt and smelled his hands. Everyone in the room gasped. Then Maomao stood up and said that she could smell the expensive incense all over his body and that his current outfit was, at best, that of a lower-ranking official. Jinshi was impressed, and Maomao explained that her nose is trained to identify medicinal and poisonous herbs, so she can tell the scent immediately. Maomao also explained to Jinshi that brothels can discern customers by their smell, which is important. Like how those with multiple showy scents tend to be rich, but have venereal diseases, and how those who smell like livestock don't bathe and are unclean. Most new visitors at the Verdigris house are shooed away. Maomao turned to Gaoshun and asked for a new set of clothes, preferably clothes that haven't been washed yet and still smell. While Gaoshun is doing the task Maomao assigned to him, she proceeds with the operation. Make Jinshi look like a commoner. She started with oil and salt to dull the sheen of his hair and roughen the texture. She proceeded by dipping a huge chunk of his well-kept hair and tying it with a scrap of fabric. Swiren is not quite sure about Maomao's plan, but assures her that commoners use whatever they can, and for this to work, they have to make Jinshi look a little more dirty. Gao Shun returned with the sullied clothes. Maomao thought it could be smellier and smellier, but it would do for now. Maomao asked Jinshi to strip off his clothes to change, but when he did, Maomao observed his chiseled body and thought to herself that he has a well-balanced physique and an extremely handsome face. Jinshi is quite uncomfortable about it. Maomao asked for some towels to hide his build. After a lot of work, they had Jinshi looking like a commoner, but his face still screams, "I'm a rich guy." So Maomao went ahead and bought out her makeup kit to complete Jinshi's disguise. Maomao noticed how perfect Jinshi's face is. No trace of facial hair or any exposed pores, and she wondered what he'd look like with feminine makeup. This idea made Maomao grin. She took out the makeup that Maymay gave her and asked Jinshi to hold still while she finished up. Jinshi completely looked like a woman after that. Gao Shun had an uncomfortable expression, and Swiren just grinned. Maomao is just glad that they're alone. Otherwise, a crowd would have been a disaster. Maomao erased the makeup from his lips. Jinshi asked what was wrong and why she did that, but they all assured him that nothing was wrong. Not awkward at all. Maomao went and added some blotches to his skin, a mole, eye bags, and even to his hands. Maomao noticed the calluses on his palm and wondered if he also did any physical training or sword training, but it was not important to think about where it came from. It just mattered that this made her job easier now. Lastly, she pulled out a bamboo filled with a putrid-smelling liquid. It's a brew used to irritate the throat to change Jinshi's voice. Bottoms up, and finally some cotton to fill up his cheeks and make him look a bit more bloated on the face. Gaoxin and Swiren were surprised by this transformation, but he's still quite handsome despite Maomao's efforts, and at the very least, they were able to tone down his natural beauty. Maomao will be taking a leave tomorrow, and Gaoxun asked if she was heading home. Maomao knew the look on his face and anticipated another favor. Gaoxun knew that it would be suspicious if Jinshi had his usual companions. Swiren and Jinshi agreed, too, that Maomao should accompany Jinshi. Maomao started making excuses, but she was caught lacking this time, and she couldn't talk her way out of it. Even Swiren wanted to put her in disguise for Gaoxun, and Swiren went to work. Swiren went pretty dark with this one. Poor Maomao, she can't even enjoy her day off. Maomao and Jinshi are in a carriage. This time their roles were switched. Maomao is the master, and Jinshi is the servant. Jinshi changed his name to Jinka. Maomao is wearing Swiren's daughter's outfit, and when they got out of the carriage, Gaoxun gave them the map, and Jinshi locked in and played his role. A little too seriously, if you ask me. They went through the market, and Jinshi is still trying to get used to being a servant, but he's got the spirit and seems to be enjoying his stroll through the market. Maomao is having second thoughts about whether she should have disguised him as a woman instead, but she fears the chaos that would ensue once that happens. Their destination is a restaurant just outside of the pleasure district, where they'll meet Jinshi's acquaintance. Basin was tasked with safeguarding Jinshi from a distance by Gaoxun, but Jinshi quickly spotted him. Maomao noticed how Jinshi is still walking in front of her, which is a big no-no, and she knows that he still has a lot to learn. Maomao went in front, and Jinshi apologized. He's a quick learner. Maomao spotted some radishes, and Jinshi looked at her and asked if she was grocery shopping, looking like a fair maiden. Maomao is disappointed because she wanted to feed his dad, but she couldn't do so right now. Maomao knows that his father is skilled, but isn't too bright when it comes to the business side of things. That's why he lives in a shack, despite having a lucrative career. If he was on the verge of starvation, the madam would force-feed him something just to survive. Jinshi is a little upset that it was a quiet walk, so he tried confronting Maomao, but she told him that there's nothing to talk about. Jinshi is still pouting and pouting. When Maomao caught a whiff of grilled chicken skewers, she bought 2 and immediately gave one to Jinshi. He held her hand as he took the skewers. Maomao savored her favorite street food that can't be found in the palace. Jinshi ate some after taking off the cotton balls, and he said that it was even better than he had at the camp. Maomao wondered if he was a soldier before, but he does seem to be enjoying himself with the skewers. Basin is still checking on them from the alleyway. Back at Jinshi's office, Gaoxun was welcomed by Swiren, and took a trip down memory lane with Jinshi's toys. Suiren asked how he was, and Gaoshun said that he was extremely pleased. Suiren said that once Jinshi finds his favorite toy, he'll cherish it the most, and whenever Suiren hides it from him, he will cry like the world is ending. Suiren commended Gaoshun for getting Maomao for Jinshi so that he could settle down somehow. Gaoshun doesn't agree with her on this one, as he thinks that fixating on one thing is a luxury that Jinshi cannot have. Back at the Pleasure District, Jinshi asked why Maomao was in a hurry, as if she wanted to part ways ASAP. Maomao stuttered and denied it, but she just wants to go back to grocery shopping for her dad. Jinshi stopped and asked if her life at the palace was really bad. Meanwhile, Basin is munching on multiple skewers at once while watching them, like a movie. Jinshi suggested that life at the palace is better than the Pleasure District. Maomao didn't deny this, but she said that she left for work of her own free will and was given a pretty room, but she worries about her adoptive father, whom she left all alone. Jinshi didn't expect her to care for someone else apart from poison and medicine. Maomao tried to hide her vulnerability by telling him that he's her teacher when it comes to medicine, so she needs him to be alive for much longer. Jinshi is amazed at Maomao's father. Maomao stated that her father knows Eastern and Western medicine because he studied abroad when he was young. Jinshi is impressed, and Maomao tries to brag about her father some more, saying how the heavens blessed him with more than one talent. Jinshi asked why he ended up in the Pleasure District, and Maomao blamed it on luck. She mentioned that despite having two talents, he lost his manhood, leading Jinshi to realize her adoptive father, Luomen, was made a eunuch by the former Empress Dowager. As Jinshi tried to figure out who Maomao's father was, Maomao spotted their destination and understood the importance of Jinshi's disguise, suggesting they should have just come to the Pleasure District. Jinshi wanted to ask Maomao if she knew some regulars at the Verdigris house. This is regarding the conversation Jinshi and Lakan had about his courtesan. Jinshi tried to probe further, but Maomao's vow of secrecy prevented him from finding out more about the regulars. Jinshi then asked how to decrease the value of a courtesan. Maomao found it distasteful that Jinshi tried asking that question, but she answered him anyway. There are many different ways of doing this, especially for high-class courtesans. At the Verdigris house, girls train while working as servants and are separated by appearance. The latter, after debuting, immediately take on customers to sell their bodies, while those with talent are taught tea ceremony and given a higher education to entertain patrons. The prices go higher, and once the prices go high enough, these courtesans rarely appear and would be considered top-ranking courtesans. The cost of having tea with these ladies would be a year's salary. Some retain their chastity until they're finally bought out, so their value comes from their purity. Losing that purity would mean losing their value as well. A pregnancy would reduce their value to nearly nothing. Jinshi tried getting close to Maomao as the wind swept her green hair. Maomao tried separating from Jinshi once they found the place, but Jinshi didn't want her to leave. Maomao thought that it was for the best that she separated from him in the meantime. Maomao believed that she pulled it off with no apparent emotion and went on among the crowd. She looked back and wished him a good night. Maomao woke up from a dream about someone trying to stab her. She tried to catch her breath and realized that it was a fragment of her memory as a baby. She remembered the way Jinshi held her hand and couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Luomen wished Maomao a good morning and asked if she had any plans for today. Maomao didn't really have any plans, and he asked her to pay a visit to the Verdigris house. At the brothel, Maomao was greeted by the attendant and asked if she was working. She's on a day off, but she's just running some errands. Maomao heard Madame and Perrin's argument, and Perrin went to welcome her, and she almost suffocated Maomao when she hugged her. Madame and Perrin still went on, and the old lady scolded Perrin for not taking up the offers that she's throwing at her, but Perrin kept on telling her that she didn't ask for them anyway. Maomao seized this opportunity to leave. Maomao visited the annex and dropped something off for a woman. She's used to being chased out by this lady, but now she's bedridden and can't even talk. She may have forgotten how to talk entirely. The woman is covered in scabs on her face and body, and she seems to be so ill that it's affecting her mental health too. Maomao went ahead and gave her medicine, but she knew it couldn't even provide any temporary relief. It's the only treatment they can think of. Back at the Verdigris house, the attendant reported to Madame that the same client was back again. Madame asked him to bring out Maimei. Maomao remembered how the Verdigris house used to operate in shame, but is now a reputable establishment. This particular lady she's taking care of used to be a courtesan who served customers before and was unlucky enough to contract syphilis. By the time Luomen came to the Verdigris house, the illness was already in the incubation stage. If he'd known about the illness, he might have been able to treat her, but nobody trusted a eunuch that appeared out of nowhere. She needed to serve customers, as there wasn't any other way to live as a courtesan. A few years later, when the rashes started to reappear, the sores spread almost instantly. Since then, the woman has been locked in the annex, out of sight of the customers, which, during this time, is quite generous considering courtesans who can't work are usually just thrown out into a ditch. Maomao opened the windows and burned some incense. Suddenly, the woman started humming, and a kid opened the door to tell Maomao that a weirdo with a monocle was at the verdigris house again, so she should just stay put there for now. Maomao knows about Lakan and that he's a longtime customer of the brothel, an old acquaintance. The woman started arranging black and white rocks on her bed, as though she were playing chess. Maomao called her a stupid woman, and later she sat in the corner, waiting until she could come out again. A little later, Maid checked on Maomao and told her the customer was gone. She also went to check on her big sister, and Maomao is being given that offer again. Maomao doesn't know how she put up with him, but she knows that this is just the life of a courtesan. Madame didn't care as long as he paid up. Madame offered Maomao an open position as a courtesan at the verdigris house, but she refused. Luckily, she has a job. Otherwise, she would have been sold off by now. Maid thinks it's a great deal from where she stands now. It's rare for a courtesan to get everything they want, but Maomao told her that their old lady would easily let the weight of silver overrule. Maid joked that she's saving up her boar fare for heaven. Maomao and Maid took a bath together, and Maid thought of how she should start taking offers more seriously because she was not getting any younger. Although Maid isn't in her 30s, this is already considered a retirement age for a courtesan. Maid wanted to work at the brothel a little while longer, but Maomao never understood that and doesn't want to revel in that thought. If it's what everyone knows as love, it's something that Maomao had forgotten and left in the womb of her biological mother. Joka and Pyron came in and took a bath with the two. Of course, they're expecting Maomao to bring in good customers, so scrubbing Maomao's back was a form of favor. Back at Jinshi's mansion, he just arrived home and removed his disguise. He never believed that the meeting place offered services similar to those in the pleasure district. That wasn't his objective. Later on, Jinshi visited Maomao to give her the jar of alcohol Lakan gave him and told her to share it with Swiren. Maomao thanked him and went back to work. Jinshi looked at her with concern, and Swiren noticed this. Later that night, before dinner, Swiren told her that they would be having a vegetarian supper. Maomao is just zoned out, but Swiren reminds her that she's still at work even though she's taking a break. Maomao thought that working would take her mind off of things, but alas, it failed. Swiren also reminded her to not hide weird plants in the warehouse. She suggested asking Jinshi to use one of the vacant rooms as storage, but Maomao refused, stating that she'd be overstepping if she asked for a favor from Jinshi. Swiren knows how Maomao is aware of where she stands, even if sometimes she appears as an apathetic person. Maomao told Swiren that she came from humble beginnings and never thought that she'd reach where she is now. Swiren told her that just because a person is born into nobility doesn't make them inherently different from the start. No one knows what life throws at them that will make their life change, and separating everything based on status can lead to missed opportunities. After that advice, Swiren asked Maomao to run some errands for her. Maomao went to the rear palace pharmacy to pick up some medicines. Maomao is like a kid at the candy shop. With everything that the pharmacy has, she almost bursts into an uncontrollable frenzy. Just then, the court lady from Jinshi's estate stopped her and looked at her sternly. Maomao explained that she's just waiting for the medicine she ordered. A store attendant called her name Suirei and asked what she wanted, and she said that she needed another supply of medicines at the guardhouse. Maomao remembered that the last time she saw her was at the military wing of the outer palace, and her scent of herbs and medicine was imprinted in Maomao's mind. Maomao felt that she didn't like her, and as Suirei picked up the medicine and left, the attendant murmured that a court lady like her shouldn't be running errands. But she then realized that Maomao was still there, and she heard what he said. He asked her to forget what he said, and quickly went on to give her the medicine she asked for. Maomao walked back to Jinshi's estate, but she wondered what medicine it was that Swiren asked her to pick up. She tried tasting it, and realized it was just potato flour. Back at Jinshi's mansion, Maomao thought of how very little she knows about Jinshi, about his work, his care regimen, diet, and other rituals, and she wonders if eunuchs are allowed to have such a meticulous care routine. It's not out of place for a noble to do that, but he wonders why he's just an eunuch and if this was just an official decree. Jinshi spoke with Gaoshun about Maomao's origins and about her father, who is an eunuch and a former doctor. Gaoshun wondered if there was any former eunuch who was also a doctor. Just then, Lakan barged in again and continued his story. Jinshi didn't like that he played funny tricks, but Lakan retorted, saying that he didn't want to hear any complaints from a thief. Lakan spent a decade trying to buy Maomao out, but Madame refused, and Jinshi stole her from him. Lakan is willing to pay any price, but Jinshi is already set on refusing his offer. Lakan went on to threaten Jinshi, and he realized that Lakan knows who he is. Lakan went on by saying that he's just concerned about what his daughter would think. This threat fazed him a little, and he was able to piece the puzzle together. Lakan is Maomao's biological father. Before Lakan left, he told Jinshi that he'd be visiting Maomao soon. Jinshi happened to pass by Maomao and told her that an official wanted to meet her sometime soon. Maomao asked who the official was, and Jinshi told her that the official's name was Lakan, the weirdo he'd been telling her about. A sudden, loathsome glare from Maomao scared Jinshi and told her that he'd turn him down, and she went on and left him. Jinshi was scared, and he wanted to make sure that he never saw that look again. Maomao went on and sighed. She realized that Jinshi had already found out. Maomao went back to the small hill at the military wing and picked out herbs, when suddenly Suirei was behind her with a scythe. Maomao told her that she hadn't picked up anything yet, but Suirei already saw the dirt on her hands and assumed that she was about to pick something from the garden. The scythe did not help, but when Maomao thought that she was going to get murdered, Suirei was just there to pick out herbs. She said that it's an unofficial garden anyway, and the doctors know about the place too. Maomao thought she was the woman in charge there, but even Suirei couldn't answer. She just knows that she's allowed to plant what she wants there. She noticed that she's pulling out the weeds from the garden. Nothing about Suiren excites Maomao at all. Maomao asked what she was planting, and Suirei said a medicine that resurrects someone. Maomao jumped on her and asked her what it was, and that she wanted to know more about it than anything in the world. But Suirei said she was just kidding. She knows that Maomao is an apothecary and wants to know how good she is. Maomao didn't know how good she was. Suirei went on to say that a little while from now, she'll be planting morning glories there, and then bade Maomao goodbye. Jinshi has a busy day ahead of him because of his meetings. Gao Shun knows that something is bothering him, but he asks him to focus on his work. If you're enjoying our recap so far, hit the like button. And if you want us to recap another anime series, comment down below. Maomao and Li Haku met and discussed what happened at the warehouse, and it turns out that the thief took advantage of the incident to do some looting at another house. Li Haku told Maomao that ceremonial tools were stolen, and not just one. Maomao asked if the items were not guarded properly, but even Li Haku couldn't answer that. The current manager is in a coma and hasn't woken up yet due to the seaweed he ate, and it turns out it's the same person who likes to eat exotic delicacies. Maomao pieced together that the fire and the person who fell into a coma are connected somehow, and it's not just a coincidence. Maomao asked about the previous warehouse manager, and it turns out it was Kaunan. Maomao can only tell Li Haku that a lot has happened, and he's starting to get suspicious of Maomao. Each of the incidents sounds like an accident and is somehow connected. There must have been a common goal for whoever is plotting all of this. Li Haku bought out the pipe that Maomao gave him, but when Li Haku returned it to the owner, he declined it. The pipe came from a court lady, which is weird that a court lady would give it to a warehouse guard. Upon Li Haku's investigation, the warehouse guard escorted the court lady outside the castle because she was walking in the dark and gave him the pipe as thanks for escorting her. Maomao theorized that the guard must have been ecstatic that he received such a premium item that he wanted to try it right away. Maomao pieced the events together. The guard was given the pipe, so it would be justifiable that it would be the cause of the explosion, when in fact the perpetrators started the fire and looted another warehouse. Maomao tried to ask the identity of the court lady, but Li Haku never got a good look at her face since she covered her face with a scarf. He said that she was tall for a woman and smelled like medicine. A light bulb sparked in Maomao's brain, and she could only think of one woman who fit that description. But she remembered Luomen's advice about speaking in conjectures. Maomao tested her hypothesis and asked Li Haku if there were more strange incidents that happened apart from the ones they've discussed, but nothing came to mind. Maomao said that she couldn't tell as well, so she explained that through a Venn diagram, two coincidences can occur simultaneously, but three at once isn't a rare case either. But if many coincidences pile up, then it would already have an intention. What if all the events that happened tied the court lady in the center of it all? She tried to be careful with her explanation, so that she wouldn't be involved with it. Li Haku praised her for her intelligence and patted her on the shoulder, but he stopped as soon as he saw the creeping gaze of Jinshi. Yikes, it looks like you'll be hearing a lot from him later, Maomao. Even the buff officer Li Haku got terrified and hurried off. Back at the office, Jinshi seemed jealous of Li Haku and asked what he wanted. Maomao vaguely answered by telling him that he'd just addressed some concerns that he had. Maomao considered Jinshi a suspect, so she tried explaining everything in detail. After that, Jinshi asked if Maomao knew the culprit, but Maomao assured him that those incidents were still uncertain because she needed more clues. She couldn't determine which of those incidents were intentional or just accidents, so it's still possible that all events are just coincidences. Jinshi noticed that Maomao wasn't excited about investigating this further, but Maomao just told him that she was just a servant, and she was just doing what she was told. Jinshi tried to pique Maomao's interest by telling her about his visit to the traders, where he found an interesting item in stock, an ox bezoar. Maomao's eyes sparkled because it turned out this was a medicinal gallstone from a cow, and it's also a rare find. Of course, Maomao had a frenzied look that scared Jinshi. These are the two expressions of Maomao that terrified the handsome official. Jinshi asked if she wanted it, and obviously, she did. Gaoshun had to ask her to calm down, so Maomao composed herself. Jinshi said he would give it to her depending on how well she worked on this case, and promised to keep her posted. Fired up, Maomao told Jinshi that she would do her best. Jinshi asked Gaoshun to take care of it. At this point, the only person I feel bad for is Gaoshun. Maomao went ahead and did her research. It turns out that the officer who was food poisoned was from the Board of Rights, but she couldn't figure out who it was exactly, and she's feeling a little bit regretful about not taking the court lady exam seriously. Then a box full of scrolls was handed to her, and the attendant offered his assistance, so she asked about which division was being referred to in the incident entry, and it turns out that it's the department that deals with ceremonies. Maomao then took notes and wrote down the incident that connected Kunan to the warehouse burning and looting. Maomao now knows that the suspect went through a lot of trouble stealing the ceremonial tools, so it has to be an important ceremony. Maomao now needs to figure out when all the ceremonies will take place. Jinshi can also be suspected because he purifies himself often. The attendant showed Maomao a scroll with a picture of a ceremonial building. It's located at the west end of the outer court and is called the Altar of the Sapphire Sky. The layout was explained by the attendant of the archives. He's also a worker at the Board of Rights, and he got demoted as an archive attendant because he talked back to his superiors. He used to worry about the architecture of the building, but so far, nothing bad has happened. Since there is a pillar that's hanging from the ceiling, it was so big that he thought that it would fall. When he voiced his concerns about the strength of the materials, he got demoted. Maomao agreed that it was quite dangerous that if the pillar fell, it would cause a lot of casualties, especially for nobles. Maomao pondered about the ceremonial tool that was stolen. If it was such an important item, then surely people would try to make a new one. And then she remembered the 3 siblings at the metalworks. Maomao then asked when the next ceremony would take place, and lo and behold, the next ceremony was happening today. Maomao ran as fast as she could. She knew that this was a plan that had been carefully thought of for a long time, and she knew that all these incidents had been connected to this ceremony. It may just be conjecture on her part, but if she's correct, then a disaster is imminent. She reached the ceremonial building and tried to get past the guard. She told him it was an emergency, but her rank didn't allow her any entry. Maomao told the guard that the ceremony should cease immediately or a lot of people would die. The guard just directed her to the suggestion box. I mean, do you think that will solve a problem that's happening now? Maomao had to be honest about the structural defect and say that if she's not allowed entry, he'll also be responsible for the things that will happen. Maomao then had the idea of trying to expose the guard to the fact that he's in cahoots with the suspect and that he's there to ensure that no one disturbs the ceremony for it to happen. At that moment, Maomao got clubbed in the face, sending her flying down the stairs. Maomao is losing consciousness after that hit, and the guard is trying to beat her up, but he's being stopped by another guard. Naturally, he'd beat her up if he got annoyed, but it seems to me that he's hiding something. Maomao tried to make a big enough commotion to stop the ceremony, so she powered through and tried again. She is still trying to beg him to let her through, because if the disaster happens, all of them will be executed. She still asked to let her through and make it look like it was an accident, and she won't even stop the ceremony. If ever there is an investigation, then she'll be the only one who will be executed. The guard questioned her about why he should trust her. Just then, from the crowd of officials, Lakan spoke and asked why they'd strike her down like that. His eyes turned into a cold gaze that sent chills down anyone's spine. Even if you are a guard, this official will not let you off easy, especially when you hit his daughter. Maomao stood there in silence as Lakan asked them to let her through, and that he'd take responsibility for the incident. Maomao didn't want to turn around to see who it was, even if she knew whose voice it was, so she bolted and went to the building. Maomao is already thinking of a nice long bath after all this is done. I'd suggest a paid week's vacation too. Maomao arrived at the altar, and the creak of the ceiling could be heard. There was no time to waste. Maomao ran for it and tackled the noble in front of the altar. It was just at the right moment as the pillar creaked, broke from the suspension, and fell with a loud crash. Maomao injured her legs, but to her surprise, she heard Jinshi's voice. She turned and looked at him, and still had the guts to ask for the ox bazaar. But Jinshi held her face as he knew that she wasn't in the right state of mind right now. Jinshi asked what happened to her face, and Maomao asked herself why Jinshi was there and why his face had that look of concern. Maomao excused herself as she wanted to stitch the wound on her legs, and finally, she collapsed. Jinshi carried her out of the building and passed by Lakan. Jinshi carried her closely, and Lakan's eyes widened as he couldn't believe that his daughter was unconscious. Jinshi carried her to his home. His blank expression was a sign that he was not feeling like his usual self. A trail of blood dripped from Maomao's legs as she was being carried by Jinshi. This attempt at Jinshi's life is something that he'll take seriously from that point on. Maomao woke up and was covered in bandages. She recognized the scent of sandalwood incense and knew that she'd been in Jinshi's bedroom. She tried getting up, but was in great pain. Swiren greeted her and was glad that she was awake. She gave her some tea and told her that Jinshi thought that it would be better if she stayed there than at the infirmary. It'll, of course, spark a lot of rumors about her, especially about Jinshi. Swiren asked her if she could get dressed. She wanted to bring everyone in. Maomao went and followed Swiren's orders. At the office, Balsam couldn't contain his anger because of what happened to Jinshi. After explaining the situation, Maomao apologized to Jinshi for the informality. Jinshi didn't mind it, but she wanted to know why she was there and how she was able to deduce the assassination attempt. Maomao told them the previous incidents were all coincidences that were connected, and it was, in fact, a conspiracy. The death of Courtesan, the warehouse fire, the theft of the ceremonial tools, and the warehouse manager falling ill because of food poisoning. Another thing Maomao noted were the stolen ceremonial tools. During the ceremony, the hanging pillar was pulled up by metal wires and fixed to the floor with metal parts. If the assassination was meant to make the whole thing look like an accident, then aiming for those metal parts would be effective. Balsam retorted, saying that a replacement should have been made in that scenario, but it turns out there was a replacement for those missing parts, and the artisan in charge of making those parts was the metalworker who passed away. If the metal parts were designed to melt when heated, then it would cause the whole pillar's support to break. Balsam remembered when they tried to resolve the issue between the three siblings and the melting ore at the drawer lock, which was the metalworker's secret technique, but the metalworker didn't know anything as he was only ordered to make the part that was needed using the secret technique. If an accident occurred at the ceremony, then the metalworker may suspect something was going on, and if the artisan is eliminated before the incident, both the identity of the one who placed the order and the secret technique would easily vanish with him. Although Maomao couldn't tell if he was killed to tie loose ends or if he was dying, Maomao theorized that he could have been assassinated as well, and the customer who asked for the parts knew the secret technique. Jinshi understood everything. Maomao had doubts about Jinshi's identity. Surely he's not just someone who's assassinated for no reason. Such a complicated scheme would mean that going through that scheme to kill Jinshi would have a great impact or worth. Maomao decided to steer clear to avoid trouble. It's another normal day for Maomao, but she still has a bandage on her face where she was hit with a club, but she looks normal more or less. Swiren knocked and told her that she had a guest. It was Balsam, and he wanted to discuss Swire. Maomao's suspicions about her were right, and Balsam told her that her corpse was found. Another loose end is tied. She was found on her bed, and she had already drunk poison and was confirmed dead by the doctor. She will be cremated tomorrow, and Maomao asked if there were other co-conspirators, but Balsam said that there was no one else so far, so Balsam left and bade her goodbye. Maomao had doubts that someone like Swiren would do that, but then Maomao observed her personality and behavior. Swiren was quite apathetic and emotionless, probably because she thought that she had no future. She spoke to Maomao as if she were testing her, and she remembered Swiren saying she'd plant morning glories on the hill. Maomao remembered the resurrection medicine she was trying to do, and she rushed out and went to Jinshi's office, asking for another request, and she asked if she could speak to the doctor who examined the corpse at the morgue. Of course, she's smiling because her curiosity got the best of her again. Maomao, Gaoshun, and Jinshi went to the morgue to examine the body, and the doctor came by. It was the same guy at the pharmacy. Maomao noticed how close they were, and now he had a very worn-out look. Maomao immediately began investigating Suire's death. She asked if the poison Suire ingested contained a ThornApple. Maomao explained that there's a small hill near the stable, and it's likely Suire planted the ThornApple there. While the plant is a strong poison in the right amounts, it can act as an anesthetic. Maomao knew that the pharmacy stocked a lot of it, and it resembled a white morning glory. The doctor seemed uncertain about the cause of death and couldn't meet Maomao's gaze. Ignoring his hesitation, Maomao pried open the wooden box where Sui Rei was buried. The doctor tried to stop her, but to his surprise, the body inside was not Sui Rei's. He knelt and cried, realizing he had been tricked. Maomao pointed out that during his examination, the doctor didn't check the body thoroughly to confirm if Sui Rei had ingested anything else. This revelation angered the doctor, but Gao Xun intervened and stopped him. Maomao deduced that besides the ThornApple, Sui Rei also took something else that came from the pharmacy, and they should be able to track her purchase at the store. Jinshi asked what she meant when she said that the corpse was wrong. Maomao said that it would be suspicious if the coffin were empty, so her body was replaced with another corpse. Jinshi asked about Suiren's body. Maomao just told them that she got up and left, meaning she's still alive. There is a certain drug that can make a person appear dead. Maomao asked the doctor, but he said that it was just a tall tale. She said that this drug comes from a faraway land and can kill and then resurrect a person later on. She knows only that ThornApple and pufferfish are used as ingredients. Suddenly, Maomao asked Gao Xun to check the coffins, and he found one with fingernail marks on it. Maomao knew that this was the one with the dead Sui Rei in it, and by the time her rescuer arrived to open it, she had already woken up. After taking her out, they set up a different coffin with another corpse to replace it. They disguised her as a vendor to make her walk out. Jinshi asked why they employed such risky methods, but Maomao said she would have been executed anyway if she got caught. Jinshi begged to differ, especially with Maomao. Maomao said that she may have won, but deep down, she knows that she's someone she'd like to meet and learn from about how to scheme such elaborate crimes. Maomao started to laugh in praise of her intellect, courage to pull it off, and audacity to cheat death and live to tell the tale. Maomao has found her mentor or her rival. She started laughing maniacally and suddenly stopped after realizing she was still with Jinshi, Gao Xun, and the doctor. She also asked for her leg to be stitched again. All that excitement opened up her wound. I'd tell Jinshi she's a red flag, but this was a different era, so it's all on him. At the Garnet Pavilion, Llewellyn was having her tea when a servant whispered something to her. She narrowed her eyes as if she had received valuable information. Jinshi drank that night and thought of how they handled the Sui Rei incident in secret. Sui Rei was a mysterious character in Jinshi's eyes, as he knew very little about this court lady. According to the doctor, she was backed by his teacher. She was adopted by him after taking note of her potential. Her past is not known, and he knows that investigating will take quite a while. Gao Xun stopped by to inform Jinshi that he accompanied Maomao home, to whom he gives his loyal right hand and his gratitude, but I think a raise is in order. Gao Xun told him that it would be dangerous if her wound opened up again, but Jinshi worried more about Lakan and his connection with Maomao. Given Maomao's attitude towards her father, there must be some issue with them. Jinshi and Gao Xun will head to the rear palace again tomorrow. Gao Xun took a sip of medicine and told him that it was the same as always, and that meant to Jinshi that it tasted bad. Gao Xun said that he didn't need to drink it if he didn't like it, but it was Jinshi's responsibility as an eunuch. Gao Xun told him that he shouldn't hold his nose in public, as it would make him look younger. Jinshi reflected on his status. His perfect appearance, mannerisms, and status made him a well-known individual, and from the day that he decided to wear his mask as an eunuch, he also made it a habit to drink the medicine to suppress his manhood daily, although it can make him impotent one day, said Gao Xun, and he spat the medicine out. Jinshi told him that he'd get impotent too, but Gao Xun already has kids who are adults now and a grandchild. Jinshi was curious about his grandchild from his eldest son. Gao Xun told him that his younger son, Balsam, was ready to get married too, but Jinshi thought he was just a young guy at 19 years old. Gao Xun said yes, he's 19, just like Jinshi. Jinshi turned away and said that he's 24. It seems that Gao Xun is implying that he should find a wife and kids. Gao Xun wanted to spend some time with his grandchildren, and all Jinshi could say was that he'd do his best. The next day, they visited the Garnet Pavilion and spoke with Llewellyn. Jinshi thinks about how she's a fashionable concubine, and she often changes and does her makeup and style so much that the emperor gets confused, so he visits her every 10 days. Llewellyn's father was the previous Empress Dowager's favorite, and he needs to be careful around her. In terms of the lack of appeal, Lishu seems to have the same case as Llewellyn. The emperor despised the previous emperor's taste for young girls, and he didn't intend to lay a finger on Lishu. The Empress Dowager gave birth to the current emperor and also gave birth to another child 10 years later. At that time, the doctor spent more time tending to the Empress Dowager than her concubine Ah Duo, who also gave birth around the same time, resulting in the loss of her uterus and later on, her firstborn child. Jinshi wondered if the child had survived. Then, he would have made himself the new prince. Jinshi visited the Jade Pavilion and spoke with Lady Jokuyo. It turns out that she could be pregnant, so Jinshi asked for Maomao's assistance regarding this matter, and he wanted her to start today. Maomao thought that this was a good thing, as she could stay far away from Jinshi and taste poison again. Swerin noticed her expression, and Maomao forgot that she was there. Swerin was disappointed because she was leaving. She thought that she could continue her apprenticeship with her, and this thought terrified Maomao. Maomao recalled her life as a food taster, and nothing much has changed. She still has her daily tasks, but now that she's also investigating Lady Gyokuyo's assumed pregnancy, she also needs to watch out for this to confirm if this is true. Lady Gyokuyo's daughter has grown up since the last time she was there. The Emperor is playing with her now and seems to grow fond of her. Maomao thought about the events that happened during the time at Lady Aduo, and she believed that the Emperor was more than just a lewd, middle-aged guy. Aduo has been his political advisor ever since she left life as a concubine, and her replacement, Lady Lishu, may cause political issues due to her age. It would be troublesome if she gave birth to a child. Back at the Verdigris house, rumors are spreading that one of the three princesses was bought out. Lihaku overheard this and was quite disheartened. It's a training day, and Lihaku isn't quite focused on his practice. It must have been because of what he heard at the Verdigris house. Bro needs to lock in for real. At the medicine pantry, Gwen, the palace doctor, and Maomao are having a conversation regarding cleaning, and Gwen protests this as he wants someone else to do the cleaning for him. Maomao wanted him to do it himself because other people could not be trusted enough not to swap out the medicine, and he even threatened him with a fake story about a doctor at a court pharmacy who got a pay cut because of the mismanagement of the drugs. I'd soil my pants if I was threatened with a pay cut too. It's also important to clean out everything once the humidity goes up, according to Maomao. So the two set to work, and Gwen did all the legwork. I guess the threat of a pay cut is an effective method of getting anyone to work hard. They had a break after a while, and Gwen was excited about having sweets and tea for his break. Maomao noticed how sweet potatoes weren't in season, yet Gwen could get them for their sweets. She thought of how he must have come from a rich family, and she noticed the paper used as a servingware for the sweets. It's quite sturdy paper, and Gwen boasted about his family leading the production of this paper back at their village, and that they're the palace supplier for this kind of paper. Maomao is impressed, and she wonders if she could get a discount if she befriended Gwen and his family. Gwen's family had a booming business, so they were able to buy him any snacks he wanted when he was a kid. However, things started to go downhill for his family when the previous emperor's mother banned the cutting down of trees. This caused the business to use different materials for the paper, which ruined the quality they were known for, and in turn, ruined the trade. Of course, Gwen's family took responsibility for this blow to their business. Since they ran out of money, Gwen's older sister went to the rear palace. When his younger sister wanted to go as well, Gwen volunteered to take her place instead and became an eunuch. Although the job brought him a good income, he never got to see his sister. Maomao empathized with Gwen and felt a little bad for assuming things about him, and she never realized how much he'd been through. Back at Lihaku's quarters, Lihaku couldn't stop thinking about Perrine. Bro caught feelings in 4K. Maomao went back to Gwen to continue cleaning up the place. Gwen seemed distressed because he received a letter from his older sister saying that their family might not be the palace purveyor anymore. Maomao felt the paper and thought that this wasn't on par with the standards of the palace. It's a big deal if you lose a big client like that. Gwen's family's business would drop. But Gwen never understood how this happened when he just received news that the company found a way to produce more paper. Maomao asked if they used any shortcuts to make the process easier. Gwen explained that the business started using oxen for hard labor, but the process and materials were still the same. Maomao knew that Gwen wasn't focused on cleaning because of this family issue. Maomao compared the paper to the others sold at the market, and the paper is apparently of much better quality. Scuffing and paper strength are the only issues with the papers, which easily tear off. Maomao asked Gwen if the process stayed the same, to which Gwen responded that nothing had changed, but his family has a special way of crushing the materials and creating glue, which is of course a trade secret. Maomao probed further. Of course she wanted to help him, but knowing Maomao, information is like a toy to her. Anything new, she wanted to know and make use of. She asked if there was special attention paid to the water. Gwen said that they use spring water to make the glue harden properly, but Gwen refused to divulge any further because it's a secret. Maomao had a light bulb moment again and asked if they used rice as glue, But Gwen said that they used wheat flour as per normal standards. Gwen slipped his tongue and realized that he said too much, and he asked Maomao to keep quiet, and she nodded. She asked where the oxen were kept, but he didn't know. Maomao made a mixture of arrowroot gruel, which he asked Gwen to try, but he said that she got the ratio of water and arrowroot starch wrong because the mixture was stuck to the cup and was very hard to drink. So Maomao taught him another way to eat it. First, she licked the spoon, and then used the spoon to mix the arrowroot solution to make it looser. And then she was able to eat it up. Gwen followed, and Maomao suggested that the mixture is like glue, and the saliva helps make it less sticky. Maomao's genius moment was ruined by Gwen's lack of comprehension. He couldn't take a hint from what she said. She then explained how the oxen may have drank from the spring water they've kept, and therefore their saliva made the mixture less sticky. After a brief pause, Gwen immediately rushed to send a letter to his sister. Maomao took her leave and returned to the Jade Pavilion. Maomao had just arrived at the Jade Pavilion when she was greeted with an immediate request. She was needed immediately, and Maomao was ready to go. Unfortunately, Li Haku made this request, asking her how much it would cost to buy out a courtesan. Maomao felt like a fool because she thought that Swirin needed assistance. Bro is simping hard, but he explained that he heard at the Verdigris house that one of the 3 princesses was already sold out. Maomao understood, although she was still quite annoyed. To put his mind at ease, she told him that courtesan prices fluctuate a lot, so she gave a rough estimate, and Maomao thought hard about the prices of the courtesans at the Verdigris house. The cost would vary based on how much a woman can make at the brothel, plus a little extra, then doubled. Maomao told him that Perrin would have 2 candidates who were longtime favorites. One was a wealthy merchant who continued to visit the brothel while he was introverted and troubled, and the other was a high-ranking official who was still in his 30s. Perrin said that he's a good bedtime partner, but she is a little concerned about how he's exhausted the next day. Neither would be a good fit once Perrin is bought out. Li Haku didn't understand the exhaustion part, but Maomao just described her as an invincible warlord in bed. When Perrin's hunger grows, she'll pounce on anyone. And I mean anyone. She's so lustful that she has to be restrained by Madam. Maomao told Li Haku that when her dad took her in, the ones who cared for her were Madam and the 3 princesses of the Verdigris house. Perrin was the one who nursed Maomao, so in a way, she was like a mother to Maomao. Although Perrin has a lustful nature, she is also as motherly as any mom. Li Haku is still not fazed by this story. Maomao realized how much he loved her, despite working as a courtesan. Despite him being a gullible guy, he's hardworking and honest, and although it's quite stupid, it's also adorable how this guy is trying hard to get his promotion for his girl. Lastly, he has the stamina that Perrin is looking for, so he wouldn't be a bad choice, with all things considered. Maomao asked Li Haku about his income, and this is an uncomfortable question for him. I think anyone would feel the same way. But after a series of questions and reactions, Maomao estimated that he earns around 1,000 silver or so a year. Maomao became blunt and told him that they'd like to ask for at least $10,000 in cash. That's just the minimum for the 3 princesses of the Verdigris house. So Li Haku pushed his luck and asked if he could still buy her out if he ever came up with that amount by some miracle. And again, Maomao took the blunt route, and this made Li Haku even more upset. So Maomao asked him to take off his clothes, for research purposes, of course. Maomao wanted to know if he had the type of body that Perrin liked. Li Haku stripped topless, and was then asked to take off his pants. Li Haku flexed, and Maomao assessed his body, and yes, he was fit. A little too much even for a soldier. Lastly, Maomao asks him to take off his underwear, and lo and behold, Jinshi comes in with proper timing, catching Maomao in the act. But then again, the situation is completely out of context. Maomao explained that she was needed there to give an opinion about a certain matter. Jinshi asked why he was undressed, and Maomao quickly responded that there was nothing improper going on, and she was just taking a good look. Another poor choice of words from Maomao, as this made Jinshi assume that she was taking a peep at Li Haku's family jewels. Jinshi asked why she would do this to begin with, and Maomao told him that she needed to know if his body was good enough, so she needed to inspect him herself. Jinshi is shocked, but Maomao explains that appearances are only a part of what defines a person, but being suited to one's taste is a plus. She thought about how she wanted to have a final look at his important parts to determine if he'd appeal to Perrin. Jinshi just sat down and asked what she thought about Li Haku's appearance. Maomao said that Li Haku has a well-balanced body and that he seems like a hard worker who trains diligently. He may even be skilled compared to average military men. Jinshi is intrigued by her ability to read one's personality just by their build. Maomao nodded and explained that a person's appearance reflects their daily routines quite accurately. As an apothecary, Maomao learned to discern a person's health status based on their physical appearance because it's quite common for customers to not tell about themselves, so this skill is naturally acquired on the job. Jinshi also wanted to know if she could do it to his body as well, but we all know he's just jealous of Lihaku. Maomao thought of this too, and she knows that she just wants to brag about his beautiful body to get ahead of Lihaku, so it's more about taking care of his ego than assessing anything. Maomao said that there'd be no point in learning about Jinshi's body because she didn't think that he'd get along with her sister. Lihaku is back at his quarters doing sit-ups, but he thinks that he's wasting time as Perrin could have been bought out already by anyone, but he knows that he can't do anything about it now. He's head over heels for Perrin. Just then he heard a knock on his door. Later, Jinshi and Lihaku were talking. Lihaku wasn't that familiar with him, but he knew his name and the rumor that he was the emperor's favorite. Jinshi started by thanking him for the hospitality he showed Maomao the other day, and he knows that Lihaku is trying to pursue someone. The jig is up for Lihaku, but he thought that Jinshi was trying to buy the Courtesan as a joke, what with his looks and status and all that. He thinks that he's insulting Perrin by buying her out, but on the contrary, Jinshi offers $20,000 to Lihaku to be able to buy out Perrin. Lihaku stood up in disbelief, but Jinshi was serious about his offer. Lihaku had doubts about this proposition, but Jinshi said that his cat, referring to Maomao, may be curious, but she's able to give him advice and would consider him as a candidate for her sister's life partner. Lihaku rephrased his words and assumed that he was trustworthy. Jinshi changed his expression, and Lihaku wondered if he picked the wrong choice of words. Jinshi brushed this off, and he let Lihaku know that he heard a lot of things about him, that he came from a good family and that he knew how difficult it was to become a military officer in the capital. He heard that he was discovered by their sharp-eyed strategist to lead a squad. Lihaku thought of how the previous squad leader retired and that he was pushed up to the position. Jinshi then asked him, "Wouldn't anybody want to have a good relationship with a promising officer?" He has a point there. But Lihaku thought that 20,000 is still too much, and he just needs half as much, or even just a quarter to do it. Lihaku thanked Jinshi for the praise and the offer, but he kept his integrity and stood his ground. Lihaku refused Jinshi's offer. Lihaku is serious about making Perrin his wife, even if to Jinshi, she might just be another courtesan, and that to welcome a wife with someone else's money is against his code as a man. Jinshi was impressed with his answer, asked to speak with him again soon, and left. Jinshi left feeling good, and Gaoshan let out a sigh of relief. Lihaku-kin kind of regretted the decision, but kept his word and decided to show off at the next training or ask for more work. He wanted to earn his keep, so he decided to write to her even if he didn't know when he'd see her next. He doesn't want to force his feelings on her. He considers how Perrin feels about him too. He continued to train and work. He didn't care if she just replied casually, but her words would help Lihaku get through the day and be inspired to do better. Lihaku kept coming to the Verdigris house to send her the letters. Lihaku wanted to earn Perrin in a way he believed in. Back at Maomao's quarters, Maomao read the letter Perrin sent her. She said that despite what the old lady thinks, she's still in the game, and that she's still waiting for her Prince Charming. Maomao knew well enough that if Perrin liked him, he wouldn't need 10,000 silver just to be with her. Another part of the letter talks about another client buying people out, and Perrin thinks that one of the servant girls got the wrong idea. Maomao closed the letter and frowned. She knows that Lakan is the person she's referring to. A man approached Lakan at this outdoor office and told him that the meeting was starting. All he can say is, "Blue roses." The man didn't quite understand it, but Lakan just chuckled and smiled. It was springtime, and at the Jade Pavilion, Lady Gyokuyo was pregnant once again. Her firstborn is already embracing her mother's tummy, and it seems that she knows that she's going to have a sibling. Her three sisters at the pavilion gleefully cheered because of the cuteness of Lady Gyokuyo's firstborn. Hong Niang started fantasizing about starting a family, but Maomao thought about her being an asset to this place, and they might never let her leave the palace. Being too good at your job can sometimes be a curse, Maomao thought. Time flies when every day is fulfilling, and Maomao's time at Jinshi's office felt like forever, even though it's just been 2 months. The little girl walked over to Maomao and wanted to draw pictures with her. Maomao started to draw a poisonous mushroom. It seemed that she was trying to make the kid her apprentice. Hong Yang backhanded her face and asked her to draw normal flowers. Back at Jinshi's office, Lakan and Jinshi were discussing blue roses. Lakan used to see them in the palace often. Jinshi disagreed and thought that he was just dreaming, but Lakan insisted on their existence. He'd like to appreciate their beauty once again, and he asked Jinshi to do everything in his power to get those roses. Jinshi humored him and told him that if they do exist, he'll try to get a hold of them too and appreciate their beauty. Lakan felt relieved and took his leave. Before he headed out, he gave him a deadline, stating that he wanted to see it at next month's party. Another request was added to Jinshi's plate, and his workload is already piling up. Gaoshun told him that he didn't have to entertain his request. Jinshi just told him not to rub it in and ask every florist if this rose exists. I don't know about you, but I think blue roses are just a myth. Although, have you ever seen a blue rose? Tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the recap so far, please hit the like button. Gaoshun went and asked every florist in the palace, but he could only tell Jinshi that roses were not in season. He sighed and went to pull out his trump card, Maomao. He asked her the next day about getting blue roses. Maomao wondered what this was all about and told him that this was beyond her pay grade. Jinshi understood, but Maomao couldn't help but empathize with his situation and how stressed he looked. She pondered about roses and how she used to sell them with her sisters for some quick cash. She asked if they saw a blue rose and Jinshi said yes. Maomao paused before asking if there's some new popular hallucinogen that makes people see things. Jinshi, of course, didn't like this thought and told her that it could ruin the whole nation. Gaoshun told Jinshi to check himself, as he was already making an outburst. Jinshi tried to collect himself and considered that possibility, and if it was really that impossible to find a blue rose. Maomao sighed and asked what he wanted. Jinshi went straight to the point and asked Maomao if she could find some for next month's garden party. She told him that this request may be impossible, because roses bloom 2 months later, at the earliest. Jinshi said that he might have to find a way to turn him down. Maomao is starting to piece together and understand Jinshi's situation. Someone's trying to test him to do the impossible. Maomao hinted that she may know the person who is trying to make this request. Jinshi sheepishly said yes, and Maomao put her game face on, even though it may be uncertain that she'll be able to pull this off. She wants to face him head on and try to make him embarrassed. Before she proceeded, she asked for a few requests. At the Crystal Pavilion, Maomao thanked Lady Lihua for letting her use the sauna she requested to have built for her when she was sick, though she felt bad for using it for free. In exchange, she gave her the Emperor's favorite book, which she sourced from the brothel. Maomao made her way back to the office and asked why she had him build another sauna, and that's for the roses to get mad. Jinshi didn't follow, so Maomao had to show him instead. It turns out that she's trying to make a greenhouse by letting the sunlight in through the glass ceiling and then blowing the steam inside through the vent, which is connected to a warming stove. The blooming process may speed up because the flowers might mistake this as the time to bloom. She can't guarantee that it'll work, so she had to test it out. Maomao took a heavy pot of plants inside the greenhouse, and that opened up her leg wound again. Jinshi and Gaoshun gasped in shock. Gaoshun had to fetch Xiaolan to help out with the manual labor. Maomao was told not to push herself too hard. Maomao thanked her and apologized, but Xiaolan is glad to help out. After carrying multiple pots of rose plants that had yet to bloom, Xiaolan asked if they'd bloom, but Maomao could only hope that this would work. Maomao started managing the temperature of the greenhouse at night, and she couldn't pass that work on to someone else as it requires precision and vigilance. One mistake can lead to failure. During the day, they were exposed to sunlight and watered. Gaoshun dropped by to bring some treats. Xiaolan is happy that she gets to skip work and eat snacks, although technically it works for Maomao. Xiaolan noticed some women looking at them from afar. Maomao told her not to pay attention to them, as they may just be curious about the plants or probably scared. The women walked away after realizing that they were seen by the two. After putting the plants back in the greenhouse, she asked the rest of the servants and Xiaolan to pick out some sprouts from the seedlings to help concentrate the nutrients on the remaining sprouts and prevent sickness. One attendant got scared of a worm, but Xiaolan picked it out without a problem. It seems like these guys are pampered too much by their families. When it rained during the day, they needed to rush to put the plants back in the greenhouse. Xiaolan felt like it was going to take a long time for it to bloom. On nights when it gets really cold, Maomao takes extra care of the plants by setting up hot coals in the greenhouse while maintaining humidity through the stove and vents. The weather can't be controlled, so Maomao is doing her very best to make sure that her plan will not fail. Xiaolan noticed that Maomao wasn't resting well and insisted that she get some rest while she did the other tasks. Maomao appreciated her concern, but refused the help she offered. The two noticed the same ladies-in-waiting again, watching them from afar. Maomao is getting irritated and wants to divert their attention. Maomao gave Xiaolan a manicure, and Xiaolan was grateful as it was her first time getting a manicure, although to Maomao this is a regular thing at the pleasure district. The ladies who were watching them felt jealous and walked away. Back at the Jade Pavilion, everyone is raving about the manicures. It's been a late trend in the palace, but it's not a big deal to Maomao. Maomao gave Lady Li Hua a manicure, and soon everyone started copying her, as the concubines were also the models during that time. Lady Hongyang seems to disagree and thinks that being fashionable is a waste of time. Maomao knows that Lady Hongyang prefers work over fashion. After Maomao's poison tasting session, she went back to the Crystal Pavilion. Lady Gyokuyo wanted her to stay a little longer, but Maomao told her that she had to attend to some preparations for the garden party. Lady Hongyang told her that Lady Gyokuyo wouldn't be attending this time around and wanted the focus to be on Lady Luolan's introduction as the new concubine of the Garnet Pavilion. But Maomao knows that this was also to hide Lady Gyokuyo's pregnancy. Her sisters at the Jade Pavilion were concerned about her mental and physical state and told her not to work too hard. Maomao tried resting, but she couldn't let herself rest, so she went back to the greenhouse, and Xiaolan surprised her with a rosebud that was starting to bloom. Xiaolan hugged her, but Maomao fell asleep on the floor. The day of the garden party arrived, and Jinshi wanted an update regarding his request. Gaoshun told him that he hadn't visited her in the past few days because everyone was busy preparing for the event. Jinshi finally stumbled upon Maomao, her face weary and her eyes full of bags and stress marks. Jinshi felt bad seeing Maomao working hard like this. The party commenced, and Lady Luolin, daughter of Master Shishu, was introduced. A lot of men were in awe of her beauty. When she came across the emperor, Shishu stepped in and asked if there was anything that needed to be improved with her daughter. Jinshi also arrived, bringing a pot of roses in different colors, even blue. Jinshi noted how they can be enjoyed when admired at their best, in full bloom. The other eunuchs were jealous of the attention that Jinshi got from the emperor. He thought of how his beauty is belittled, and how his efforts as a young eunuch are disregarded and considered as someone who is an attention seeker, no matter what his appearance may be. He noted that lust can easily be exploited, and that envy is manageable. But what's troubling for him is when he can't tell what they are thinking. Even Shishu, a man who was favored by the mother of the former emperor, couldn't even be bothered to be looked at by the emperor. That's why Jinshi had to pretend and smile. But Jinshi is wearier of Lakan than anything. Lakan is annoyed that Jinshi was able to pull off his request. Back at the Jade Pavilion, Maomao fell asleep on Yinghua's lap. She asked her not to go back to the Crystal Pavilion anymore, as she noticed how she always looked exhausted whenever she came back. Maomao apologized, and Jinshi arrived to offer a blue rose to her. Maomao apologized again, but Jinshi knew that she was not apologizing to him, and after brushing it off, he asked her how she was able to do it. Maomao just told him that the roses were just dyed on the inside because originally the roses were white, and when they mixed water with several colors, they had the white buds suck them all up from the stem, and that's also the reason why there were many colors. However, the leaves ended up coming out black, so they were plucked off, and to maintain their vibrant colors, all she had to do was fix some cotton, soak them in the dyed water, and plant the stems there. Although the only thing that was difficult was to have the roses bloom and to avoid any conflict among the officials, she revealed the secret to the emperor and enjoyed listening to Maomao's explanation. Jinshi wanted to clarify what happened with the blue roses that were seen in the palace, but Maomao just shrugged it off by saying that someone must have spent a lot of time feeding blue water to the roses. Jinshi asked why someone would do that. Maomao told him that it was probably just a gimmick to woo women. Jinshi noticed Maomao's painted fingernails, but Maomao told him that she didn't think that the style was for her. Even if she had some balsamic and woodsorrel, the result would be a much prettier manicure. Balsam is considered a fingernail dye, and woodsorrel is also known as a cat's foot, and when combined, creates a vivid red color. Even if she made it prettier, her manicure is better than it was before. Maomao asked for the item she requested, and Gaoshun confirmed that it's been set up. Maomao is now waiting to catch Lakan off guard. Back at the garden party, Lakan is disappointed that his provocation failed. When it was time to leave, Lakan reflected on how people looked like ghost stones, pieces in a game that can be controlled given the right conditions. Men are black stones, and women are white stones. He compared his subordinates to chess pieces and how they start as pawns and climb up the ranks to become cavalry and cannons. He likes manipulating people to be in his favor and win battles. Placing people in the right places would guarantee his victory. Suddenly he feels a sharp pain in his right eye. It hurts more than usual, and a red color is flickering in his view. He started to notice the red manicures on the lady's fingernails, but the ones in his memories couldn't compare, as they were soft like the color of balsam. Then, he came across Maomao, Jinshi, and Gaoshun. He sees Jinshi and Gaoshun as the bishop and the advisor, respectively, and Maomao is the only one who isn't a chess piece. She also had a manicure, and she was staring at him with menacing eyes. Back at the Verdigris house, Perrin opens the window to give the woman in the annex some fresh air. Meanwhile, a stare-down between Maomao and Lakan took place at the bridge where the garden party was held. Maomao challenged Lakan to a game of chess, first to 3 wins. Lakan offered a handicap to his daughter, but Maomao refused. Jinshi thought that she should have accepted it. Maomao made the game more interesting by placing a bet as a reward. If Lakan wins, then Maomao gets to live with Lakan, but since Maomao still has a contract with Jinshi, he will have to wait until her duties are over. Jinshi protested, but Gaoshan reminded him that he promised not to interfere. Lakan is surprised that his daughter is employed. In exchange, if Maomao wins, he'll have to buy out a courtesan at the Verdigris house. A certain courtesan needs to be bought out, and Lakan realizes what she's trying to do, so he accepts the terms of the bet, and Maomao adds 2 more rules. Maomao fills 5 cups with hard liquor and buys out a small flask of medicine. She placed it in small amounts, but 3 sips of this would turn it into poison. So she poured the medicine into 3 cups and shuffled them. The winner would pick 1 cup from the group, and the loser has to drink it in one go. This is the first rule. The second rule is that for whatever reason the player abandons the match, the player automatically loses. Lakan accepted the rules without a trace of fear on his face. Jinshi worries about the outcome of the match, and the game begins. Maomao lost the first game and drank from one of the cups that Lakan picked. Maomao lost the second match and drank from another cup. Jinshi is starting to lose her composure because she lost 2 games in a row. Jinshi assumed that since Maomao challenged a chess master and a bona fide strategist, he thought that she had some skill to win the match. It seemed that Maomao knew the rules, but hadn't played an actual game. Jinshi couldn't tell if she drank the poisoned cups or not. Maomao asked if she could play the third match again, and Lakan accepted. Maomao won this round, but it seems that Lakan let her win because he didn't want to poison his daughter. Maomao gave him the privilege of choosing the cup to drink from, and Lakan asked if there was a distinctive taste from the poison. Maomao just said that it tasted bad. Jinshi started to uncover his strategy. Even if one of the cups has a different taste, he'd know that his daughter can avoid poison, so he's losing on purpose to do that. Lakan got the poisoned cup, which means Lakan no longer needs to lose on purpose, because all the cups containing the poisoned liquor have already been consumed. Jinshi worries that Maomao will lose. Lakan noted that it was quite warm outside, and then suddenly he started to lose consciousness. Jinshi tried to ask Maomao what happened, and if she poisoned him. But Maomao just told him that all of the cups contained alcohol, and that the medicine itself was alcohol. So she just knocked him out cold by getting him super drunk. Maomao tried forcing him to drink alcohol, but she realized that he abstained from it. Jinshi also noticed that, even before, he just drank fruit juice. Maomao asked them to drag him out of there and bring him to the brothel to pick out a flower. Lakan dreamt of his childhood. He seems to have a problem identifying people and often mistakes people for certain identities, like how he thought that his nanny was his mother. His father thought that he was useless and ran off to his mistress in disgust, and his mother wanted to get him back. Because of that, despite being the eldest of an important family, he was able to live freely and devote himself to mastering chess in his spare time. He was taught to differentiate people based on their voices, behavior, and build instead of their faces. This is when he learned how to substitute the blur that he sees in people's faces for chess pieces. His uncle was the only one who guided him, an intelligent but clumsy individual. He saw his uncle as a chariot piece, which to him is a person whom he respects the most. Thanks to him and his family name, this mindset is what carried him to becoming a squad leader, leading them in combat despite having no prior experience. He used his men-like chess pieces to make up for the lack of tenure on his resume, and sure enough, he made a name for himself. He had fun playing with people like chess pieces. He continued his undefeated streak at work and in games. But that day changed when he met the courtesan at the Verdigris house. In a world full of black and white, that was the only bright color he saw. Both challengers were undefeated in the places they represented, but no matter who won or lost, the audience around them would have had a good time watching them duke it out. He was defeated by this woman named Feng Xian, and he laughed his heart out. Experiencing defeat like that was so refreshing that he saw Feng Xian's face, and it was the first time in his life that he could make out the features of a human face. He described her as someone with defiant eyes, like a balsam flower that would burst if touched. Feng Xiang challenged him after that, only this time with chess. Several years after that, they continued to play Go and chess. Feng Xiang was born at the brothel and had a personality that was purely made of pride. Since she never had a mother, the only family she knew were the people that she worked with at the Verdigris house. It's also believed that a courtesan can never become a mother, not in the pleasure district. to say the least. Once a talented courtesan gains popularity, it becomes difficult to sell them as they attract a lot of potential customers and therefore more income. Feng Xian fit the profile, and although she wasn't everyone's cup of tea, some clients favored her. Her price gradually rose, and it became difficult for Lakan to see her. One day, he visited her and noticed some balsam flowers in a vase and woodsorrel. Feng Xian heard that it was a medicine that helps treat poisons and insect bites. Like the balsam, touching a ripe fruit causes the seeds to burst. Lakan is fascinated by this. Feng Xian asked when he'd be coming back, but Lakan told her that he could only visit 3 months from now, as always. Feng Xian seemed disappointed after hearing this. That's when Lakan heard that Feng Xian was about to be sold to someone. Lakan couldn't keep up with the rising price of Feng Xian, so it's just natural that he got eliminated from the competition. He was a military officer, but since he lost the title of heir to his half-brothers, her price was out of his reach. Feng Xian challenged him again, but she wanted to make it interesting. If she wins, then she'll give him anything he wants. If she wins, she'll take everything she wants. A terrible thought crossed Lakan's mind. He chose to play Go, and Feng Xian asked Maomao to leave as she wanted to concentrate on the game. Maomao obeyed her orders and left the room. While they were playing, their hands touched one another. One thing led to another, and the two made love in the brothel. There were no sweet words from Feng Xian, but Lakan couldn't offer any either. These are two damaged people in love. In that way, they were quite similar. After they made love, Feng Xian wanted to play Go, and Lakan thought of how he wanted to play chess himself. That night, they slept next to each other, and Feng Xian went and sang a lullaby. It seems she's singing as though she were a mother, or she's longing for that motherly care. Or rather, she wants to become one. Lakan fell asleep with her beautiful voice. 3 months later, Lakan's uncle, the one he idolized so much, was ousted from his official position. He was shamed by his family, and Lakan realized that though his uncle is intelligent, he is equally clumsy. Lakan's association with his uncle also ended up with him going into exile by studying abroad, as his father didn't want to end up like his uncle. Lakan couldn't protest because of his father's familial authority. At the same time, Feng Xian wrote to him that the buyout agreement had failed and that Lakan would be able to visit him again in 6 months. Unfortunately, this wasn't so. It took Lakan 3 years for him to return. He arrived only to find piles of letters from Feng Xian. One was stained red with a pouch containing what seemed to be something dried up. When Lakan realized it, it was a dried-up finger, and it was Feng Xian's. This was a popular way to curse someone, and there was another finger in the bag, too. The reason that the deal may have failed is because she may have been pregnant. Lakan regretted his way of thinking, saying that all he had in mind was playing Go and chess. Lakan ran through the pouring rain, out of breath, searching for his beloved. When he arrived at the Verdigris house, he was too late, and Madame was beating him with a broom, scolding him for his absence and for abandoning her. Lakan got to his knees, but all he could think of while being beaten with a broom was how he soiled her reputation by impregnating her. He didn't mean for it to happen. He didn't mean to be the reason why the buyout fell through, but it was too late to do anything about it. Feng Xian was deemed a streetwalker because of it. Feng Xian was already sick and was covered with scars, but she still wrote to him. Lakan wailed and cried, but no matter how much he beat the sound of the storm, no matter how much he lamented, he couldn't undo what he did. He meant well, but his intentions were short-sighted. He never knew that Feng Xian was willing to take that risk with him. Lakan woke up and recognized the place. He was at the Verdigris house and was welcomed by Maomao. She knows how much he's drunk and tells him that he was brought here by a noble servant. Lakan didn't think it would end up like that. Maomao used to be Feng Xian's servant girl. He remembers playing with her a lot, though back then she seemed to be timid when playing chess. Maomao gave her tea, and Lakan spat it out the instant it hit his tongue, as the brew was too bitter. Maomao mentioned that Maomao made it, and Lakan stopped and appreciated her effort. Maomao also left a box for Lakan, and it contained a withered blue rose. Maomao said that even though the rose withered, it still retained its shape. Lakan looked back and thought of Maomao. Maomao was called, and she had to leave Lakan. Maomao and Balsam are returning to the palace. Maomao held a rosebud and looked at it with deep sadness. Lakan is still reflecting on his actions at the brothel. He wanted to be with the daughter she left behind. That was his only wish. It's only natural for her to hate Lakan, but he still wants to be a part of her life despite that. Still, a bet is a bet, and he'll have to try again next time. Although he's not particularly fond of Jinshi because he kept on putting his hand on her shoulders, especially during the match, Lakan is plotting some sort of revenge on him. Madame barged in and told him that she knew that she was trying to buy out one of the courtesans. But the price didn't matter to him, although 100,000 pieces of silver may be a bit too much. Madam let him have his pick. Down below, All the courtesans were lined up, except Maomao, one of the three princesses. Madame didn't mind that Maomao was on the roster, but no matter how beautifully they dressed, they all looked like ghost stones to him. I guess the bust size differentiates the major characters, but anyway. Lakan tried to pick Maomao because of their history together, but Maomao insisted that he choose well, but would still go with him if he picked her anyway. Maomao opened the door, and a familiar lullaby echoed through the main hall of the verdigris house. Madame ran towards the door to close it and told Maomao not to open it, but it was too late. Lakan recognized that voice and bolted to where the sound came from. He remembered the withered rose and how beautiful it was, despite its state. Lakan got the message. Lakan ran to the annex and finally met Fengxian. Her voice is still beautiful, but she's too far gone. Tears came down his eyes. Madame tried to stop him and told him to pick out the courtesan that he liked. Lakan came close to Fengxian, kneeled, and told Madame that he wanted her. Madame protested, but Lakan retorted that she said that he could pick anyone he wanted. He is willing to pay whatever amount. Maomao stopped Madame from scolding him. Lakan sat across her and gave her 2 ghost stones. As soon as he held her hands, her face lit up, and Lakan asked her to play with him. It seems that he healed her, and he cried tears of joy. Maomao cried too. She never thought she'd see the day when her big sister would come back to her senses. Maomao asked why she had to lie, and she could have told them from the start that she was pregnant. Madame just shook her head. Lakan wanted to buy out Fengxian, the woman who was as beautiful as a balsam flower. Balsam was the one who accompanied Maomao in dropping off Lakan at the verdigris house. Maomao was tired. Balsam saw Luolan and Shishu and was disgusted. Maomao noticed them too and thought that they must have stayed there after the garden party. It seems that Shishu was the one who forced her daughter to become a courtesan at the rear palace, although Maomao wishes Balsam wouldn't badmouth officials in public, as she can get in trouble too if he gets heard. Balsam accompanied her to Jinshi's office and was asked if she was tired, but no matter how much Maomao denied it, it was apparent in her appearance. Suiren went on her mother's instincts and fed her a good meal. Jinshi visited Maomao and asked why she would show mercy to him when he thought that she hated Lakan. Maomao explained that it was not that she hated him. After all, she was there because he was able to land that shot. Jinshi hoped that she'd be less blunt, but that's just how Maomao is. Moreover, Fengxian wouldn't have gotten pregnant if she didn't want to. Maomao said that if there were drugs for abortion, ending it would have been easy, but she chose to have a child. Maomao thought too that perhaps Lakan was the one who was tricked. Women are clever, according to Maomao, and it's not hard to make a good estimate of when one is most likely to become pregnant by tracking period cycles. As a courtesan, she was able to control the dates of his visits by sending him letters. Deep down, Maomao knew that his absence could have been the reason why she went mad, and on top of that, her worth as a courtesan plummeted too, so much so that she was willing to hurt herself and send her finger in the babies as well. Maomao asked if Lakan ever talked to him outside of his office, and Jinshi noticed it too. Maomao explained that he couldn't recognize faces. Although Lakan can tell the parts like eyes, mouth, and nose, he's unable to view the parts together as a whole, and she hears that everyone's faces look the same to him. Jinshi felt bad for Lakan and couldn't help but empathize with his situation. That's what Luolan told Maomao, that Lakan led such an unfortunate and troubled life because of his condition. Though, for some reason, Lakan was able to discern Luolan's and Maomao's faces. That's why he has a strange attachment to me. Maomao asked Jinshi a rhetorical question. What if Lakan came to him and asked him to call him Papa? How would he react? Jinshi was speechless, but told Maomao that he'd be tempted to shatter the monocle. Maomao didn't want to believe that he was her father, but a stud horse at best. It seems that she still has bitterness towards Lakan. Maomao wondered if he understood the message behind the withered rose, but it didn't matter if he didn't. Maomao told Jinshi that while she does dislike Lakan, she couldn't bear to hate the guy. She's grateful that she was able to become Luoman's daughter. Jinshi was quite confused because Maomao looked disgusted the first time she saw him. Maomao was not impressed by Jinshi's shallow thinking and told him that he's got a lot more to learn. When Maomao tried to stop the ceremony, Lakan helped her. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen, and since he knows that Maomao takes from him too, he chose to help her out. Jinshi didn't believe that Lakan knew anything about it at that point. Maomao explained that, compared to her, who uses facts and evidence, Lakan uses his gut feeling when something's not right, and he's rarely wrong in that scenario. Maomao shook her head, stating that he was too lazy to do anything about it himself. If that guy had taken action, Maomao would have had the resurrection drug by now. Even after all that's happened, Maomao is still in pursuit of that drug. Maomao was filled with envy and grunted. She warned Jinshi that, while he would never become his ally, Jinshi should avoid making him his enemy. Jinshi understood. Gaoshun is just standing there. Hearing this entire discussion, Maomao asked what was wrong, and Gaoshun said that Maomao had to remember that no father wants to be disliked. Maomao signed and continued her dinner. A few days after returning to the rear palace, Mei sent Maomao a package with a letter retelling Maomao the events that happened. In the package was also a beautiful shawl. Maomao remembered Mei's words, that if ever she got bought out, she would have to dance for her. Maomao hoped that Mei would be bought out, as she deserves the world for being such a kind woman. Later that night, Maomao had a fit change, went to the palace walls, and stood there. She had everything fitted out, even her makeup, and she had a blue flower on the side of her head. Maomao started dancing under the night sky. She's a different woman here from the Maomao we know. She danced gracefully, though she's surprised that she still remembers all that. She turned and saw Jinshi watching her closely. She was caught by surprise, and she tripped out of her dress and almost fell. Luckily, Jinshi caught her just in time. Maomao asked why he was there, and it turned out that he had a report that another weird woman was climbing the outer wall, so he had to investigate. Maomao thought she was sneaky, but unfortunately she wasn't. Jinshi patted her head and asked her not to cause any trouble. A kind guard was the one who directly reported to Jinshi because he recognized Maomao's face. Maomao needs to work on her sneakiness. Anyway, Jinshi asked what she was doing, and Maomao just explained that she was dancing to celebrate a courtesan being bought out. It's a customary thing among the courtesans. Jinshi is just surprised that she can dance at all, but Maomao just said that it was just a part of her basic education. That's why she had to learn it. The rumors reached Jinshi that Lakan bought out a courtesan, and he also sent a notice of leave. He's going to take a 10-day vacation. Maomao also received news that the Verdigris house will be celebrating for a whole week. There's no way to know how much he spent on buying out Feng Xiang, but with the number of lamps being put out in the pleasure district, it's natural to assume that it was no ordinary courtesan. A buyout is never seen in public, and the rumors also spread across the pleasure district. Maomao thought that this marketing tactic was planned by Madame. Jinshi wanted to know who Lakan bought out, but Maomao kept it a secret, but she knew who it was. Maomao never knew who her biological mother was, but from the rumors, she was able to piece together who her real mother was. Feng Xian is already in her dying days, and Maomao's memories of her are quite unpleasant, as Maomao is the living fact and reason why her worth has diminished. Maomao wanted to keep it in the past, and wanted to stay with her reality of how Luomen was her father, and how happy she is being that way. Maomao told Jinshi that if you cut the tip of a finger, it eventually grows back. Maomao's wound opened up again. The dancing made her bleed through her bandage. Maomao thought that her dancing got her body warmed up, and due to the experiments she did on herself, she had a high pain tolerance. Jinshi winced, but Maomao told him not to worry, as she'd stitch it up immediately in front of him. Jinshi screamed, stopped her, and told her not to do it there. He grabbed her by the waist, jumped down the walls, and landed safely. It's just light work for Jinshi, of course. Jinshi carried her in his arms. Maomao is worried that they'll be seen, but he tells her that it's too dark to see anyone anyway. Besides, it's the second time he's carried her like that. Maomao wanted to say something to Jinshi for a long time. Maomao touched his face and used her charm to ask Jinshi about that ox. Quite anticlimactic if you'd ask me, but Maomao has always been cunning. Jinshi headbutted her. Maomao was tricked, and Jinshi never had it to begin with. Although she's glad that she got to see a different and immature side of Jinshi, she never thought it would be this much easier to talk to him. The two walked on the night while the stars were shining brightly upon them. The next day, Maomao is still using the gift Jinshi gave her to psych her up for the day. Then she's called by Jinshi in the Jade Pavilion. Every one of her sisters at the pavilion took care of her. Jinshi wanted to request another investigation from Maomao, and she smiled. She is ready to take on another incident that will test her wit. Maomao's story has just begun. So that's it for the Apothecary Diaries. If you like the recap, do like, subscribe, and comment. Until the next one, see you.